Chapter 591, Sacrifice. It had been so long since Fang Yuan had come to imperial court blessed land, and he had entered 88 True Yang building so many times, but he had never forgotten his original intention in coming to Northern Plains. That was to save Dang Hun Mountain. He needed landscape as before Gu to save Dang Hun Mountain. There were many difficulties and challenges to obtain this Gu. The main thing was it was with a person. This person was Tai Bai Yunsheng. Ever since Tai Bai Yunsheng joined He tribe army, Fang Yuan had been placing his attention on him. Several months ago, Fang Yuan uncovered some information. When He Lu Lan obtained the One-Edge Owner token, he was able to explore the rewards of every round. Tai Bai Yunsheng had gone to visit him and inquired about the existence of Lifespan Gu. But at that time, 88 True Yang building did not yet have Lifespan Gu. When the 55th floor had condensed, He Lu Lan informed Tai Bai Yunsheng he had discovered a 15-year Lifespan Gu. After the 55th floor completely formed into shape, He Lu Lan investigated the location of the Lifespan Gu and could precisely tell it was the reward for clearing the 85th round. From then on, Tai Bai Yunsheng had put all his energy in the 55th floor. He called up many Gu masters, forming an enormous group and forcibly crashed through the rounds. Relying on his might, prestige and enormous rewards, along with repeatedly requesting He Lu Lan and other experts, he was actually making fast progress. Hard work paid off. Tai Bai Yunsheng spent all his wealth and finally was able to reach the 85th round. Fang Yuan naturally did not wish to see Tai Bai Yunsheng obtaining what he desired. Tai Bai Yunsheng was old, and did not have much lifespan left. It was natural behavior for him to increase his lifespan with Lifespan Gu. But if he really obtained this Lifespan Gu, he was definitely not going to risk advancing into an immortal. If he did not risk advancing to an immortal, there would not be the inspiration from heaven and earth that would form the immortal Gu landscape as before. If there was no landscape as before Gu, how would Fang Yuan save Dang Hun Mountain which was about to completely wither away? Especially the past few days, he had learned more information. Tai Bai Yunsheng had attempted many times to pass the round and he had already found hope. He did not stint on borrowing from He Lu Lan and even agreed to He Lu Lan's condition of becoming an external elder of He tribe. Tai Bai Yunsheng was then able to use He tribe's resources to recruit large numbers of experts and form a powerful lineup, charging into the 55th floor to make the final attack. Despite Tai Bai Yunsheng taking the risk to advance to an immortal in the memories of his previous life, Fang Yuan was cautious and did not dare to take the risk, deciding to personally intervene. Time waits for no man. Fang Yuan had intended to get rid of Mo Yao's will first, dealing with the internal problem before attacking the external problems. But this matter had not made any progress, so now, he used his owner token to secretly infiltrate into the 55th floor. The situation of the 55th floor had already been probed out by Tai Bai Yunsheng. There was a majestic and grand blood river flowing here, and in the depths of the river, there was a legendary and mythical blood palace erected. The blood palace had 3 great halls and 69 auxiliary halls. Every hall contained large numbers of blood path Gu worms as well as blood beast guards. The large groups of blood path Gu worms were of huge strength, but as long as they were killed one by one over a period of time, there would be a point when they are all slaughtered. The problem was the blood beasts. Even after these blood beasts were killed, they would absorb blood and resurrect within a short moment. One could say that they could be killed but not killed. There was no way of reducing their numbers. Tai Bai Yunsheng's several attempts at passing the round had all been thwarted by these blood beasts. But at the last attempt, he had unintentionally discovered a pleasant surprise. As long as they keep on charging forward to the depths of the Great Hall and take out the command token hanging on the main beam, they could make the blood beasts dissipate. This discovery birthed a strong confidence in Tai Bai Yunsheng. He was thoroughly poor now, and did not hesitate to sell himself to He tribe, borrowing funds and forming a Gu master group to charge through this round. When Fang Yuan secretly entered this floor, Tai Bai Yunxing's group had already charged through 33 side halls and were presently in a fierce battle to reach a towering main hall. Fang Yuan took out the six-edge owner token, and with a thought, immediately had complete control over this floor. The six-edge owner token could let Fang Yuan control up to 6 floors of 88 True Yang building. Fang Yuan had already used it once to control the 7th floor. Now, he was using it a second time to control this 55th floor. He Lulan had a 1-edge owner token and the floor he controlled was the 5th floor. With a shift of thought, Fang Yuan's figure disappeared on the spot and appeared on the main beam of the Great Hall. He leisurely sat on the main beam, and not far from him was that crucial command token. With a bit of concentration, the battle scene of Tai Bai Yunsheng and his group appeared in Fang Yuan's mind. The deeper they went towards the Great Hall, the more blood beast guards there were, and the battles that occurred were extremely intense. This group of Tai Bai Yunsheng did not even have 50 people now. They had been charging forward the whole way, suffering disastrous casualties which left behind a trail of corpses along the way. 2 great rank 5 Gu master experts Zhu Zai and Gao Yang took turns as the front vanguard of the group. Meanwhile Tai Bai Yunsheng, as the number 1 healing Gu master of northern plains of this generation, was protected in the center of the formation. He continually used man as before Gu, rays of light shooting forward and shining upon the corpses, resurrecting the Gu masters, or shone upon live Gu masters, healing their injuries and recovering their primeval essence in an instant. But even Tai Bai Yunsheng, a rank 5 peak stage Gu master, was in a very sorry state. Gu masters were falling down time and again, and although he used all his strength, he truly could not save everyone. The countless blood beasts surged out of every corridor near the Great Hall and every room, blocking the group's way with very dense numbers. The closer they got to the main command token, the stronger the blood beasts became. And blood beasts could absorb blood to quickly recover and resurrect. By the time Tai Bai Yunsheng and the group charged to this place, the blood beasts they had killed on their way had once again resurrected and chased them, blocking their way back. The situation was getting very dangerous. No wonder Tai Bai Yunsheng risked advancing to immortal in my previous life. This round's difficulty is rather high, unless a blood path Gu master works with them. Fang Yuan was in control of this place and could see the actions that Tai Bai Yunsheng took as easily as reading the lines of his palm. To a blood path Gu master, this round was no less than a paradise. With so many blood path wild Gu to subdue and blood beasts to devour, their blood path cultivation would strengthen rapidly. It was a pity blood path could not be easily revealed. Because of blood sea ancestor, a blood path Gu master would be hunted persistently by the righteous path the moment they appeared. And because blood path Gu masters could quickly increase their battle strength, even demonic Gu masters widely feared it. Often, when a blood path Gu master was discovered, not only would they be hunted down by the righteous path, they would also suffer sneak attacks from demonic path Gu masters. There was not even one blood path Gu master among He tribe army. Even if they existed, they were hidden deeply and would not appear for Tai Bai Yunsheng's use. Fang Yuan ascertained for a moment and knew clearly that the chance of Tai Bai Yunsheng succeeding was extremely minute. The worry in his heart immediately dissipated by more than half. Fang Yuan laid back on the beam and took out, passing the time while paying attention to Tai Bai Yunsheng's progress. Death was possible when advancing through 88 True Yang building. Fang Yuan was scheming for landscape as before Gu, and could not allow Tai Bai Yunsheng to die at the moment. Kill, we must break through this siege. Otherwise, we are all going to die. Tai Bai Yunsheng's face was filled with blood stains, roaring loudly to raise the morale. Waves of blood beasts roared and snarled, before pouncing on the group like a blood-colored giant wave. The Great Hall was a scene of tranquility. Fang Yuan leisurely flipped through the pages while adjusting his posture to make himself more comfortable. Grr. A blood beast with the head of a tiger and body of a horse madly snarled while rampaging in the group of Gu masters. Two Gu masters met its attack, one died while the other was heavily injured. Man as before. Tai Bai Yun Sheng shouted and raised his palm, a white light immediately shot out and shone upon that injured Gu master. The Gu master immediately recovered his previous uninjured state. The terrifying injuries from the blood beast's attacks disappeared without a trace. The Gu master panted roughly, he was still frightened, retreating back behind the front lines. The defensive gap he left behind was immediately filled up by another Gu master. But that dead Gu master's corpse was swarmed by the blood beasts and roughly dragged away. Tai Bai Yun Sheng did not make a move. Without advancing to an immortal, even a rank 5 Gu master would have limited primeval essence and have to use it cautiously. Moreover, that dead Gu master's Gu worms were severely damaged, his defensive Gu worm was even pierced and destroyed. Even if he was resurrected, he would be killed again. The remaining Gu masters grieved and cursed, but they could only look as their companion's corpse was madly torn apart by over 10 blood beasts. Blood beasts were extremely sensitive to blood, and even a bit of bloody odor could make them go crazy. By swallowing stronger organisms' blood, they could strengthen themselves. Soon, the dead Gu master's blood was completely absorbed by the blood beasts. The whole corpse became a dried-up mummy, creating a wretched spectacle. The beasts that had absorbed his blood started to grow human-like forms. Some grew human-like eyes, some grew several human ears, and some grew agile human arms. But when they were spending time in absorbing the corpse, the pressure on Tai Bai Yun Sheng and the group greatly reduced, and they took this valuable opportunity to break through and moved forward tens of steps. Fang Yuan flipped through to Chapter 3, Section 14. Northern Dark Ice Soul awakened his elder sister Desolate Ancient Moon, and the two again asked for advice from Cognition Gu on how to save their father. Cognition Gu said, "Humans, Qingbai Mountain has disappeared, who knows when it will form again. I am also not clear on other ways to bring your father back to life. But no need to be dejected, you can try asking Wisdom Gu. I am its mother, wisdom is the crystallization of cognition. The student surpasses the master, the things Cognition Gu did not know, Wisdom Gu might not necessarily be unknowing of." Under Cognition Gu's directions, Northern Dark Ice Soul and Desolate Ancient Moon found Wisdom Gu. Wisdom Gu had somewhat of a connection with Renzu. Back then Renzu had used rules and regulations Gu to capture it. But it was able to escape in the end. At first, Wisdom Gu was not willing to help Northern Dark Ice Soul and Desolate Ancient Moon. But seeing that they were introduced by its mother Cognition Gu, it reluctantly said, "O humans, I can show you the right path. But I need remuneration, one of you need to hand over your middle age to me." "I will give my middle age to you." Desolate Ancient Moon immediately replied with no hesitation. She was awakened by her little brother Northern Dark Ice Soul and had been bestowed with the meaning of her life, which was to bring her father, Renzu, back to life. Thus, she replied immediately without the intention of passing it to others. Northern Dark Ice Soul was not able to argue with his sister and could only let her offer her middle age. This meant, once Desolate Ancient Moon's youth had passed, she would directly skip middle age to reach old age. But to save her father, she did not have many misgivings. Wisdom Gu obtained Desolate Ancient Moon's middle age and gave her directions. In the center of the golden desert in the west, there is a still blue sea with no ripples, as flat as a mirror. That is the source of all living beings, all lives in the world originates from there. And in the depths of the blue sea lie many life Gu shining upon all living beings. You need to infiltrate the sea, catch a human-shaped life Gu and bring it to shore. This human-shaped life Gu can bestow your father a new life. But remember, you cannot spend over 15 minutes in the sea, otherwise you will be assimilated by the sea. Wisdom Gu added another sentence in the end, it is extremely difficult to find human-shaped life Gu. Only a person who has truly comprehended the truth of life can do it. If you are not able to do it, don't blame my solution for not being easy to use. Desolate Ancient Moon wanted to ask something, but Wisdom Gu quickly flew away and did not give the siblings any chance to make inquiries. The clamorous shouts and cries resounded everywhere. The blood beasts surged forward like sea tides. Tai Bai Yun Sheng and the group were like a reef, resisting the attacks of the blood beasts time and again, while also moving forward step by step with difficulty. Almost there, we are only 300 steps away from the great hall door. Someone shouted, boosting the morale. Careful. Suddenly, a Gu master at the side warned. That Gu master who had tried to boost morale was dazed, and the very next moment, a blood beast with the head of a dragon and body of a bear fiercely smashed into him. Crack. The Gu master's ribs instantly shattered from the crash, and the blood he puffed out contained pieces of internal organs. His body was sent flying from the smash. The Gu masters behind tried to stop him with all their strength. In an instant, the formation turned chaotic and there was a crisis of it collapsing apart. Hold on, continue to hold on. Tai Bai Yun Sheng, his face stained with blood, shouted furiously with extreme anxiety. In such a battle situation, if the Gu masters scattered, they would immediately be torn to pieces by the surrounding countless blood beasts. Only with the Gu masters working in a tight formation, could they have a chance at survival. But the Gu masters were retreating step by step. Large numbers of blood beasts broke the defense line and fiercely pounced upon them. Miserable screams started rising continuously. Many Gu masters were still recovering their primeval essence as much as possible. Being caught unawares, they were immediately torn to pieces by the blood beasts. A mantis-like blood beast brandished its sickle arms and charged in the very front. Swish! A Gu master's head was slashed apart, blood started spurting out of the Gu master's neck and the head flew high, but before it fell down, it was grabbed by a blood beast flying in the air and with a gulp, was swallowed down. But the red-hot blood fell down, splashing right at Tai Bai Yun Sheng's face. Tai Bai Yun Sheng quickly wiped away the blood and was barely able to open his eyes. The dense bloody stench assailed his nose, and agitated a group of blood beasts. Finished. Tai Bai Yun Sheng's heart sank to the bottom, but right at this time, a figure pounced down like a tiger getting off the mountain. Boom boom boom. After several rounds, the figure killed the mantis blood beast and finally stabilized the formation at this final juncture. It was Zhu Zai. A rank 5 Gu master, a famous expert of the demonic path. Everyone was saved, feeling like they were dragged back from the cliff. But Zhu Zai also paid a price. There were 3 new wounds on his body, all of them so deep one could see his bones. Tai Bai Yun Sheng quickly activated Man as before Gu to heal him. Zhu Zai recovered his previous state and the new injuries completely vanished. At the same time, his intensely depleted primeval essence recovered back. It was only that the several expendable Gu he had used to gain a burst in his battle strength earlier could not be restored. Man as before could only target human bodies and had no effect on Gu worms. This Man as before has marvelous effect, but unfortunately, it cannot be used on one's own body. Fang Yuan sighed before gazing back to the book in his hand once again. Desolate Ancient Moon and Northern Dark Ice Soul traveled an arduous journey through the Golden Desert and arrived at the center of the desert where they saw the blue sea. The blue sea was so beautiful that nothing more beautiful than it could be imagined. Just like Wisdom Gu said, even strong winds could not cause the slightest of a ripple on the blue sea. With the soft golden sand surrounding it, it looked like a deep blue gemstone embedded on this golden cloth. The siblings infiltrated into the depths of the sea and sure enough found large numbers of life Gu packed together in the sea depths. These life Gu were like blue gems. But they were of different sizes and shapes. Some looked like a colt, some like a tiger or leopard, some like an eagle or dove, while some like a snake or flood dragon. The siblings were dazzled from the sight. They saw all kinds of life Gu from flowers, birds, fishes, insects, beasts, snowmen, hairy men and all other shapes, except the human-shaped life Gu. Helplessly, the siblings could only get out of the sea and back to the shore. The moment they had left the blue sea, a deer-shaped life Gu Northern Dark Eye's soul had been holding, let out a soft light before jumping on the sand and turning into a fawn. This was the birth of a life. The siblings looked at this sight in wonder, with their eyes wide open. Only when the fawn had hopped far away, the elder sister Desolate Ancient Moon suddenly comprehended. No wonder Wisdom Gu flew away immediately after speaking and did not let us question it. I have understood the truth of life. The truth of life, what exactly is it? Northern Dark Ice Soul quickly asked. Desolate Ancient Moon pointed at this blue sea in front of them and asked in return, tell me, if we were to really find a life Gu, a human-shaped blue gem, and we bring it back, what will it transform into? Northern Dark Ice Soul thought for a moment and replied, it should be like that fawn and turn into a real active life form, right? He suddenly looked distracted. Desolate Ancient Moon looked at him with a smile, it seems you have also understood. We are these life forms. We were formed from life Gu. We, ourselves, are human-shaped blue gems. Northern Dark Ice Soul completely understood, where did humans come from? Wisdom Gu had already made it clear before, this blue sea is the source of all living beings, all lives in the world originate from here. Humans, naturally also originated from here. Their father Renzu was once a blue gem in the depths of this sea. By some opportunity and coincidence, it was able to come out from the sea and form a zestful life form that roamed the world, surviving with difficulty and reaching this stage. But humans were the spirit of all living beings, so how many human-shaped gems could there be in such a large sea? It was definitely extremely few, and it was very possible Renzu was the only one. Searching for a small blue gem in such a vast sea, how big of a project was this? This was innumerable times more difficult than Desolate Ancient Moon looking for the only success Gu in Qingbai Mountain. I know a method which can get us a human-shaped life Gu quickly. Desolate Ancient Moon suddenly said. What method? Northern Dark Ice Soul had a bad feeling. Desolate Ancient Moon smiled, that is. I will go into the bottom of the sea and assimilate with this blue sea, returning back to a life Gu. Although Desolate Ancient Moon had transformed into a monster, she was intrinsically a human. The essence of her life had not changed. Since she was a human, once she was assimilated, she would form a human-shaped blue gem like life Gu. This speculation was not wrong. No wonder Wisdom Gu said, but remember, you cannot spend over 15 minutes in the sea, otherwise you will be assimilated by the sea. Wisdom Gu's words did not have any superfluous words. Wisdom Gu had also said, if you are not able to do it, don't blame my solution for not being easy to use. One could analyze from this sentence, it was extremely likely there were no human-shaped blue gems in the blue sea. If the siblings were not willing to sacrifice themselves, they would not be able to obtain human-shaped life Gu. As such, don't blame me, the Wisdom Gu, if you are not able to do it. No, you can't sacrifice yourself like this, elder sister. Northern Dark Ice Soul immediately dissuaded. Although he wanted to bring his father back to life, he did not want to sacrifice his own sister. I need to do it, the meaning of my life is to bring father back to life. Desolate Ancient Moon replied tranquilly. Northern Dark Ice Soul suddenly could not say anything. It was him who gave this meaning to Desolate Ancient Moon's life, and Desolate Ancient Moon was living for this. In other words, if her father could not be brought back to life, there would be no meaning in her life. Then what would be the use in continuing to live? As long as she sacrificed herself, she could bring her father back to life. This was the greatest meaning of Desolate Ancient Moon's life. Humans originally were gems of the world. It is only that whether the gems are bright or not require us to polish them. Every effort we make, every choice we take, are all polishing each of our gems. And humans can only obtain life by sacrificing life. Desolate ancient moon leisurely spoke before sinking into the blue sea. Northern dark ice soul tried his best to stop her, but he was not able to. Desolate ancient moon had become a monster with incomparable strength, and he was not her match. After 15 minutes of time, desolate ancient moon was assimilated by the blue sea and turned into a human-shaped blue gem. But this blue gem was not of a healthy human shape but a badly damaged, less than half a proper human shape. This was because desolate ancient moon had given her middle age to wisdom Gu. Humans, in the process of understanding what life was, would often have already used up half of their lives. Northern dark ice soul held this blue gem with tears in his eyes, and left the golden desert. He did not have any of the happiness of success, but instead sank down into extreme remorse. From a certain perspective, it was him who had killed his elder sister. There are still 50 steps left. Tai Bai Yunsheng shouted with all his strength. They pushed forward with difficulty with a companion falling down every short moment. The intense and bitter battle had left them with only 5 people now. But success was right in front of their eyes. Just a little more of a push. I will tear these blood beasts into pieces. Zhu Zai and Gao Yang protected Tai Bai Yunsheng from left and right. They also shouted to raise the morale. 30 steps. 2 more fell down, leaving behind Tai Bai Yunsheng, Zhu, and Gao. The surrounding blood beasts brandished their claws and fangs, looking extremely malevolent. They advanced wave upon wave in their endless numbers. 10 steps. Zhu Zai and Gao Yang used all their strength, suffering disastrous losses to their Gu worms because of excessive use, and their primeval essence was also almost depleted. This old man owes both of you a favor. I swear I will definitely reward you heavily sometime in the future. Tai Bai Yunsheng's eyes shone brightly, his tone extremely earnest and sincere. Old sir, what are you saying? We were saved by you back then. Without old sir, we would not be alive today. Old sir's life-saving favor is as heavy as a mountain. Even if we die today, it can be considered repaying your favor. Gao Yang and Zhu Zai replied, full of emotions. There existed two-faced hypocrites in the righteous path, and demonic path likewise was not without true heroes. 5 steps. Save me. Zhu Zai shouted and without caring for defense, pounced on the blood beasts blocking the way forward, perishing together with them. Tai Bai Yunsheng stretched out his palm but the white light did not come out. He shouted out involuntarily, not good, my primeval essence is finished. This bad news immediately made Gao Yang's expression turn pale white. All along, Tai Bai Yunsheng had served as the core of the group. Only with man as before Gu's continuous support, everyone was able to push forward this deep. It doesn't matter, no blood beasts will enter the Great Hall. As long as I can enter the Great Hall, I can recover my primeval essence quickly and save Zhu Zai. Tai Bai Yunsheng shouted. Gao Yang's spirits rose. Tai Bai Yunsheng was right, blood beasts might tear apart the corpse, but their main priority was absorbing the blood. As long as most of the corpse was intact, there was hope of saving Zhu Zai. Snarl. Next moment, a strong blood beast that looked like a giant python suddenly moved in from behind and swallowed Gao Yang in one bite. 2 steps. The Great Hall's door was very close. With a body filled with injuries, Tai Bai Yunsheng staggered forward through a small gap among the blood beasts. At the crucial moment, he used up his final precious bit of primeval essence to summon a golden armor which resisted the blood beast's attacks. He reached. Humans can only obtain life by sacrificing life. Gao Yang, Zhu Zai, I will remember your sacrifices. Tai Bai Yunsheng exerted all his remaining strength to push open the door. He fell down inside the great hall, the blood beasts behind him roared, snarled and brandished their claws, but did not dare to enter the great hall. It was just like what Tai Bai Yunxing had investigated before. Tai Bai Yunxing lay down on the ground with no strength left in his body. The injuries all over his body were continually transmitting intense pain. He took a few strong gasps of breath, and suddenly started laughing heartily, but his laughter contained a sobbing tone. Tears were overflowing on his face. This round has 3 great halls and 69 side halls. If one crosses the round completely within a certain time period, they can obtain high-grade evaluation. Passing 2 great halls and 46 side halls will be considered middle-grade evaluation. I surpassed 23 side halls and 1 great hall, I can only obtain low-grade evaluation. But regardless, I have obtained Lifespan Gu. 15-year Lifespan Gu can increase my lifespan by 15 years. A whole 15 years. Tai Bai Yunsheng was exclaiming with deep and boundless emotion, when suddenly, his eyes blacked out and he fainted. Chapter 592, Deep Dark Shadow. Fang Yuan lowered his head, observing Tai Bai Yunsheng who had already fainted and lost consciousness. He was the culprit who caused Tai Bai Yunsheng to fall unconscious. At this moment, Tai Bai Yunsheng's body was bathed in blood. He was lying on the ground and within his deep eye sockets, his eyes were tightly shut. There were lots of injuries on him, his snow-white hair had stuck together because of dried blood, he no longer had the demeanor and appearance of the #1 healing Gu master in Northern Plains. Merely a few steps away, outside the main hall's doors, a sea of blood beasts were growling, the messy overlapping noises were sent over with great force. Fang Yuan raised his head, staring at them as he opened his mouth and said lightly, "Shut up." Almost immediately, there was silence outside the hall. The blood beasts all became quiet, lying prostrate on the ground like obedient cats or dogs, staying motionless. Fang Yuan made use of the 6-edge owner token to control this floor, he was the master of this floor, these beasts were all his to control, they listened to his commands and moved according to his will. Fang Yuan shut his eyes, his mind entering this floor's control system as he let his senses observe the area. At the moment, in this particular round, there were many Gu masters remaining. Among these Gu masters, some were Gu masters recruited by Tai Bai Yunsheng, but during the earlier fighting they had been separated from the main party. Another portion were the information gatherers of all the different forces, they were all investigative Gu masters. They came from He tribe, Ma tribe, Yi Lui tribe, and all the other large forces, with the intention of observing whether Tai Bai Yunxing failed or succeeded. As for this hall and its surroundings, within them, other than those rotten and dried corpses, only Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunxing were left now. Fang Yuan closed the great hall's door, half squatting on the ground as he stretched out his right palm, grabbing onto Tai Bai Yunxing's skull. His Gu worms had been prepared long ago, he activated them one by one. Very soon, above Tai Bai Yunxing's head, a weak shining white light was formed, becoming the only source of light in this dark and dim great hall. As the light got more and more intense, Tai Bai Yunxing's face gradually showed a painful expression, and his brows were frowning more intensely. After a moment of stillness, Fang Yuan suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes had no pupils, it was pure white in color. The whites of his eyes gave off a weak light as at the same time, a large number of images flashed across in Fang Yuan's mind. Tai Bai Yunxing's life, from his old age all the way until he was young, all the memories had been extracted by Fang Yuan. An old man was walking in northern plains, the sky was vast and the wilderness was boundless, the winds blew as the grass was drooping in response, wolf groups were howling freely. "Old sir, we brothers will never forget the kindness you have displayed by saving our lives." Gao Yang and Zhu Zai kneeled down together before Tai Bai Yunsheng. A purple-haired old beggar opened his mouth, showing his remaining few teeth, laughing in a weird manner. "What kind of Gu master do you want to become?" He, I happen to have 3 complete sets of inheritances with me here. This lad has a passable appearance, we will choose him. In the Inkmen city, an Inkman was pointing at Tai Bai Yun Sheng, who was in his youth, as he laughed loudly and said. Even further back, during the time when he was even younger. Why did you betray me? On the night of their joyous wedding, Tai Bai Yun Sheng fell weakly on the ground as extremely loud shouting and fighting noises resounded outside the tent. As for his wife, she had an expression full of coldness and hatred. She slowly got close to him as her eyes shone with a ruthless light. She gritted her teeth as she said, Tai Bai Yun Sheng, if you want to blame someone, blame your parents. They were the ones who devoured my tribe, they killed my parents, I want to exact revenge for them. During the time of his childhood. My son, you are the next generation tribe leader of our Tai Bai tribe. You are not allowed to cry, do not have the heart of needless sympathy. To survive in northern plains, we need to have a tougher heart, a tougher stance. After all, in the future, you have to lead our Tai Bai tribe. His father was scolding him in a very strict manner. Ah! Fang Yuan was screaming from the intense pain. In his mind, countless images were flashing, they were depicting Tai Bai Yun Sheng's entire life, a legendary tale. Such a huge amount of information had a large impact on Fang Yuan's mind and caused great damage to him. Thankfully, the images were not endless and unceasing, there came a time when they finally ended. After browsing through Tai Bai Yun Sheng's entire life, Fang Yuan immediately stopped using his gu worms, sitting down on the ground to rest. He was breathing roughly and panting, his entire body was coated in sweat. A long time later, his pupils regained their original color. Soul searching, this was not an easy action. Especially when Fang Yuan was concerned about Tai Bai Yun Sheng's safety and did not want to cause harm to his life, he could only endure most of the pressure of the soul search himself. After stopping the soul search, Tai Bai Yun Sheng was still sound asleep, but his tightly knitted brows had slowly eased as he relaxed. His breathing was more stable now, and his expression was rather peaceful. In contrast, Fang Yuan's brows were starting to frown instead. I did not find it. He heaved a long sigh in pity. What did you not manage to find? In his mind, Mo Yao's will could not hold in her curiosity as she asked. Fang Yuan's actions were very strange, it made her very curious. Fang Yuan did not answer her, he only frowned even more as time passed. The matter of landscape as before Gu was related to his grand scheme after rebirth, how could he possibly tell this to Mo Yao? Landscape as before Gu was an immortal Gu that Tai Bai Yun Sheng obtained only after he became an immortal. Rumors said, this Gu was created naturally on its own when Tai Bai Yun Sheng became an immortal, and heaven and earth resonated with him, causing it to spontaneously condense. But there was another possibility, that within Tai Bai Yun Sheng's mind, he had the immortal Gu recipe for landscape as before from the start. If he really had the immortal Gu recipe, then Fang Yuan could steal this Gu recipe, along with river as before Gu and mountain as before Gu, bringing to Xianxia blessed land and asking Xianxia land spirit to help by refining this immortal Gu on his behalf. This way, he did not have to take a risk and seize the food from the tiger's mouth, it would greatly reduce his danger. But after this soul search, Fang Yuan obtained a horrible result. Fang Yuan did not manage to find the immortal Gu recipe for landscape as before, this indicated that the rumors were really true. Landscape as before Gu was indeed a product of the resonance of heaven and earth during the moment when Tai Bai Yun Sheng became a Gu immortal. That also meant that, if Fang Yuan wanted to obtain this immortal Gu, he would have to snatch this Gu by force from Tai Bai Yun Sheng, who had already become an immortal by then. Fang Yuan was still not a Gu immortal. As for battling an immortal as a mortal, Fang Yuan had never heard of any examples of success in his life, it was no doubt tougher than ascending to heaven. But what other choices did he have? Back then, among the three options, this was no doubt the easiest way. He had already invested time and effort into this plan. Although Fang Yuan did not have absolute confidence of success, he had no choice but to continue making preparations and take a risk to try it anyway. Outside 88 Truyang Building, Tai Bai Yunxing's image appeared slowly. He is back, he is back. How was the result? Someone saw Tai Bai Yunxing fighting his way into the main hall. Oh no, Lord Tai Bai Yunxing is motionless, it seems he has fallen unconscious. The surrounding Gu masters immediately went over as a crowd. After taking a look, all of their expression changed mildly. Tai Bai Yunxing's body was filled with extremely serious injuries, they were all secretly stunned in their hearts. He is still breathing. Someone stretched out his finger and placed it below Tai Bai Yunxing's nose, shouting loudly, "Quick, who is a healing Gu master, quickly stabilize old Sir's current injuries." "I will do it, I will do it. I am also a healing Gu master." Many healing Gu masters quickly helped out. Tai Bai Yunxing's reputation and extremely kind-hearted nature had already been ingrained in everyone's hearts. There was no doubt that he was much more popular and loved by people compared to He Lulan and Chang Shanyin. Even Lord Tai Bai Yunxing suffered injuries to such a grave extent. Sigh, it seems that this time, the round might not have been passed. Someone sighed. The time for the challenge has already ended, but most of the Gu masters did not return safely. We have truly suffered a huge loss this time. Among all of you, has anyone seen Lord Gao Yang and Zhu Zai coming out? Someone jolted abruptly, suddenly asking. Everyone started looking around frantically, but they just ended up staring at each other. No one saw the figures of Gao Yang and Zhu Zai. Meanwhile, in 88 Truyang Building, that round was still intact and available for challengers. Except that in this short period, Gu masters were not allowed to enter again. Everyone was very clear about what this implied. Ever since 88 Truyang Building had formed, 5 rank 5 experts had already been sacrificed. Such grave casualties and losses, it caused the entire area to go into deep silence. When Tai Bai Yunxing opened his eyes eventually, he found himself lying on a bed. His entire body was feeling weak to the point where he even had difficulty sitting up. Seeing that he opened his eyes, a servant nearby who was attending to him shouted immediately out of joy, "Old Sir, you are finally awake, you have finally woken up. Someone quickly come, Old Sir has woken up." Very soon, Tai Bai Yunxing could hear a large number of footsteps rushing over towards him. A group of healing Gu masters came to his side, checking his body's condition for him collectively. "Lord Elder, rest assured, your injuries are no longer a problem. Except that you are of old age, so the injuries this time have affected your physical condition. From now on, you have to recuperate carefully, especially for the next few months. Your body is weak and lacking in nourishment, you need to rest and recover slowly." The head of the healing Gu masters urged him in a gentle tone. In order to get a team to challenge the round, Tai Bai Yunxing had no choice but to agree to He Lulan's request and had already become an external elder of He tribe. Tai Bai Yunxing's gaze was completely unfocused. Ever since he woke up, he had been in a daze. After hearing these words, he regained some of his senses as he asked, "Where is this place?" Replying to Lord Elder's question, "This is Lord He Lulan's residence. Ever since Lord Elder failed in challenging the round, and returned barely alive, our tribe leader has been very concerned. He personally brought you here to receive treatment. The servants have already reported your awakening. I believe that very soon, Lord Tribe Leader will be here to see you." The leader of the Gu masters once again replied. Failed in challenging the round, and returning barely alive. Tai Bai Yunxing frowned slightly. The memories in his mind were slowly surfacing, as he recalled that final scene that had happened. He expended his final portion of primeval essence, activating his defense Gu as he successfully charged into the great hall amidst the attacks and rampaging of the blood beasts. But soon after, he fainted and fell unconscious, losing perception of all his senses. When he woke up, he found that he was lying here. Does that mean I really failed in challenging the round? Tai Bai Yunxing's tone suddenly turned sharp, as his gaze became sharper than ever. Lord Elder. The Healing Gu masters around the bed all looked at each other. They wanted to offer words of consolation, but they could not bring themselves to say a thing. Thus, they could only lower their heads silently. The room suddenly became completely quiet. Tai Bai Yunxing's gaze was staring into the distance. After being silent for a while, he suddenly raised his head and laughed. So I failed after all. All that sacrifice for nothing, all that sacrifice for absolutely nothing. He could not get up now, so he could only use his palm to slam the side of the bed with all his strength, laughing maniacally. Lord Elder, Lord Elder. The Healing Gu masters were frantic. They quickly tried to calm him down. My pitiful Gao Yang, my pitiful Zhu Zai, they sacrificed their lives in order to protect me. Tai Bai Yunxing's eyes were overflowing with tears, his laughter was filled with pure agony. My condolences to Lord Elder, there is a limit to what a person can do. Lord Elder had already done his best. Lord Elder, the fact that you managed to survive is already the greatest fortune among misfortunes. People die when they are killed, the dead cannot be resurrected. Old sir, you have to stay strong for all of us. Everyone spoke one after another, trying to calm down the unstable Tai Bai Yunxing. But these words felt like utter sarcasm when they entered Tai Bai Yunxing's ears. They were like needles stabbing into his heart one by one. At the final crucial moment, Tai Bai Yunxing preserved his primeval essence and did not choose to save Gao Yang and Zhu Zai. It was for himself, to activate the defense Gu and charge into the main hall. That was him, for his own selfish gains, he had ignored the sacrifices of his comrades. Was this still Tai Bai Yunxing? Was this still that admirable and publicly recognized figure in Northern Plains who helped and saved the injured, healing people everywhere, the Tai Bai Yunxing who eliminated pain and suffering? Why did he do that? But at that crucial moment, he had no time to think about it carefully, he chose to do it in an instant. Purposely sacrificing Gao Yang and Zhu Zai to obtain a chance for himself to obtain that 15-year lifespan Gu, which was the reward for passing the round. It was for his own purpose of extending his life. Such a decision made Tai Bai Yunxing feel very unfamiliar with himself. He felt extremely ashamed, extremely inferior, and extremely regretful. Back then, there was no hesitation, he did not think about it. That decision had transformed his morals into a whip, interrogating his soul and lashing at his conscience. Tai Bai Yunxing shut his eyes in great pain, his fists were tightly clenched. Lord Tribe Leader has arrived. Subordinate pays respects to Lord Tribe Leader. The entire room kneeled, as He Lu Lan carried a smiling expression and walked towards Tai Bai Yunxing. Seeing Tai Bai Yunxing's pained expression, He Lu Lan frowned lightly, but soon his frown vanished. Elder Tai Bai, I am very glad that you are awake. I have already heard about the situation. You, Gao Yang, and Zhu Zai had displayed the bravery and courage of us Northern Plains men. Although you failed, it was an admirable attempt. As long as you learn from this attempt, I'm sure you'll be able to pass this round in the future, overriding failure with success and washing away the humiliation. Tai Bai Yunxing did not open his eyes, he did not speak a word as his expression remained painful. He had already understood the reason why he failed. After he charged into the main hall, he had successfully avoided the attacks of the blood beasts as he fell on the main hall. But after succeeding, he laughed wildly in great joy, and because his state of mind had been greatly volatile and fluctuating, together with his grave injuries, he lost consciousness. To get through this round, there was a time limit as well. Once the time was up, his unconscious self was sent out forcefully along with the other Gu masters at the fringe of the battlefield. He was obviously a single step away from success, but he failed because he had fallen unconscious. Such an ironic ending, this was not the source of the intense pain in Tai Bai Yunxing's heart. His pain was because he had abandoned his comrades for his own selfish gains. Was this still Tai Bai Yunxing? His memories flashed in his mind one by one once more. From youth, he had always believed in the power of love. Since he was a child, he had been reputed to have a kind heart. When Tai Bai tribe devoured other tribes, he saw that his childhood friend was going to suffer the horrible fate of becoming a female slave, thus he stepped up and requested to marry her. Because of this, the batch of captives were also spared. But on the night of their wedding, his wife betrayed him. The captives contacted outside enemies and assaulted his tribe, causing his parents to die from this incident. His slave life after that was extremely tough and pitiful, and he had always been suffering the intense guilt and regret in his heart. Finally, one day, he gave an unacquainted old beggar a bowl of water out of kindness, and the old beggar gave him 3 immortal inheritances to choose from. The first could allow him to bathe in flames and step on fire, surpassing the mortal realm. The second could allow him to control wind and fly in the air, roaming the world freely. The third could allow him to surpass life and death, gaining the ability to assist the world's people. Tai Bai Yunxing chose the third inheritance. From then on, it was as if he found the light in the darkness. His heart was no longer in turmoil as he had no regrets anymore, he had been completely reborn. After so many years, the old beggar's laughter was still ringing in his ears. Surpassing life and death, gaining the ability to help people, this had become his life's goal. And indeed, he truly achieved this in his life later on. Countless people felt gratitude towards him, his kind reputation had spread widely, his light was shining over the entire northern plains. He was a living legend. But right now, he had failed. His failure was not in that he did not receive the lifespan Gu. But because he betrayed his comrades, he betrayed the way of life that he had set for himself. But the most ironic thing was, all these were done by his own subconscious. He spent almost his entire life to establish a way of life for himself that he believed in. But that moment, he completely destroyed his own ideals. He had seen the other side of himself, his own selfish nature. He had once thought, he was the person everyone knew him as, walking on the grassland under the setting sun, helping and saving people throughout the region, the savior of the world. But now, in his heart, this image was slowly leaving him, it was limping away from him. In the brilliance of the setting sun, his shadow was stretched out and extended into the horizon. The shadow was extremely dark. Chapter 593, Appearance of the Strength Path Immortal Gu. He Lulan's brows furrowed as he walked out of Tai Bai Yunxing's room. An expert cannot become conceited by success nor discouraged by failure. Who could have thought the grand, renowned Tai Bai Yunxing was no more than this? He was very dissatisfied with Tai Bai Yunxing's mental state. Tai Bai Yunxing is the #1 healer. If his state is not good, the difficulty for me to cross the rounds will increase by a lot. He Lulan raised his head and looked above. On the summit of the sacred palace, the bright aurora was surging majestically. 88 Truyang building had already condensed 67 floors and was currently condensing 68th floor. He Lulan gazed at 88 Truyang building with an obsessed look, a cold light of ambition flashing in his eyes. In the 68th floor there existed a strength path immortal Gu. He Lulan possessed an one-edge owner token. This strength path immortal Gu was assimilated into 88 Truyang building just moments ago, and he could immediately perceive it. This was a rank 6 strength path immortal Gu called Flying Bear Strength Gu. The Flying Bear was a desolate beast with battle strength that could match Gu immortals. Flying Bear Strength Gu could allow the Gu immortal to have a definite probability of bursting out with a Flying Bear Phantom during battle and strike with the divine strength of Flying Bear. This was the immortal Gu He Lulan wanted. With it, he could advance into a strength path Gu immortal. I must get this immortal Gu in my hands. My plan for revenge only has hope if I have it. He Lu Lon unconsciously clenched his fists, but soon relaxed. His trusted aide He Shu came towards him in short, quick steps, and kneeled before him. He Lu Lan's expression quickly changed back to normal. Even in front of his trusted aide, he did not reveal even a trace of his true emotions. Every day, during this time, He Shu would come to report on the movements of every great expert in the sacred palace. Lord Chang Shan is still at the 90th round of 7th floor and has still not made any progress. Lord Yi Lui Sang is at the 49th floor, he has crossed the 81st round, 30% of the Gu masters with him have perished. He Lu Lon had completely opened up 88 True Yang building to everyone. It was a generous move that was rarely seen in the history, attracting a craze in everyone to explore 88 True Yang building. Even though every owner token's price was raised to a sky-high amount, there were still countless people scrambling for them madly. Humans die for wealth and birds die for food, blinded by greed, many had lost their lives. Adding the casualties from the attempt of Tai by Yun Sheng, 5 rank 5 experts had died already, Chang Biao, Pan Ping, Hao Ji Lu, Gao Yang and Zhu Zai. This was an enormous loss to He Lu Lon. The smaller the forces he could mobilize became, the harder the difficulty in getting Flying Bear Strength Gu. Of course, there was also a certain benefit by completely opening up 88 True Yang building. As long as the participating Gu masters could survive, most would be able to experience rapid increase in strength. There were also not a small number who were able to successfully advance, creating many new rank 4 and rank 5 Gu masters. 88 True Yang building was originally arranged by Giant Sun Immortal Venerable for the benefit of his descendants. This 68th floor is the main focus of our tribe, it even far surpasses winning over the 39th floor. This is a task specially handed to me by a certain supreme elder of our tribe. Thus, every bit of strength in the sacred palace needs to be treasured. He Shu, make this news public, starting now, 88 True Yang building will be closed and everyone will listen to my arrangements. After breaking through the 68th floor, 88 True Yang building will be opened again. He Lu Lon instructed, his tone containing a will that could not be questioned. When He Shu heard this was actually a task given by the tribe's supreme elder, his body shook and his expression turned extremely solemn. Get to work. He Lu Lon waved his hand. He Shu accepted the command and retreated. Every imperial court contest was a chess game played by Gu immortals. Even the stronger Gu masters were no more than chess pieces. To seek some kind of immortal Gu immortals would provide support to certain tribes participating in the imperial court contest. This was a common set of circumstances. He Lu Lon was sure that everyone would be dissatisfied by his decision to close 88 True Yang building, but under the pressure of a Gu immortal's reputation, no one would dare to raise an issue. Tai Bai Yun Xing's injuries are too severe, but I can make him participate in the battle after he rests for about half a month. After all, he is a healing Gu master and will be in the rear of the battlefield. He needs lifespan Gu, I can start from this aspect to mobilize him. Chang Shan is fighting the 7th floor. His days have not been easy because his son suddenly perished in this round. To get back his reputation, he must pass this round. But he demanded Flying Bear Phantom Immortal Gu from me before, taking loans and owing me a great deal of resources. I can mobilize him. There is also Yi Lui Sang, he has a fire path support type Immortal Gu and would be of strong help to me. I can entice him with heavy bait, of course, the crucial point will still be using the strength of the 3 Gu immortals, Shui Song Zi, He Cheng and He Bai. I should send them letters. Ei Bai was extremely excited after reading He Lu Lan's letter. I waited so long and now finally the wooden chicken Gu has appeared. I did not think it would be within the 68th floor. He did not doubt the contents of this letter in the least. After all, He Lu Lan was He Cheng's son, and was the current He tribe leader. If his loyalty was doubted, then was there anyone in the world who was worth trusting? He Cheng smiled brightly. Virtuous brother, every cloud has a silver lining, hard work will eventually pay off. Did the letter mention anything about strength path immortal Gu? He Bai's face flushed red. I am ashamed, I was only thinking of wooden chicken Gu and forgot about nephew's situation. Nephew has great strength true martial physique, he must have a strength path immortal Gu to advance to Gu immortal. Nephew has mentioned about this in the letter, but unfortunately a strength path immortal Gu has yet to appear in 88 True Yang building. Still no strength path immortal Gu. He Cheng frowned. Previously, when He Bai had been worried about wooden chicken Gu, he was consoled by He Cheng. This time, it was He Bai's turn to console He Cheng. Brother, no need to worry, 88 True Yang building has altogether 88 floors, there are still 20 floors that have not condensed yet. He Cheng nodded, sighing, immortal Gu dark limit won't be able to mask his physique any longer, this can almost be considered as my son's final chance at life. Sigh. Man proposes and God disposes, we can only leave things to the will of heaven. He Bai's heart was fervent as he changed the topic back to wooden chicken Gu. He reminded, brother, time waits for no man, let's quickly prepare to give some help to He Lu Lan. Yes. This matter demands immediate actions, which place did the letter mention? He Cheng slowly stood up from his seat. He Bai also followed suit and stood up, it is near Demon Blood Hill. Let's go. The two Gu immortals were very straightforward as they immediately set off. Not long later, they arrived at the sky above Demon Blood Hill. Demon Blood Hill was a famous area in northern plains where 4 great tribes of the righteous path had allied to annihilate a gang of demonic path bandits who had been ravaging around northern plains. The demonic path bandits were extremely fierce because of their deep background, with demonic path Gu immortals secretly supporting them from the dark. After the intense battle, the bandit gang was completely annihilated while the righteous path also suffered serious losses. The blood of demonic path Gu masters dyed the whole hill red, and thus later generations called the hill, Demon Blood Hill. He Lu Lan had requested help in the letter. He tribe's 2 Gu immortals had already prepared for a long time and were ready to leave at any time, this was to help He Lu Lan to clear the floor as fast as possible. But 88 True Yang building was located in Imperial Court Blessed Land, why would the 2 Gu immortals from He tribe come here? 88 True Yang building structure needed to be mentioned for this. The previous ink text had explained, 88 True Yang building was a rank 8 immortal Gu house formed from innumerable small towers, with Divert Disaster Gu as one of the main cornerstones. There were gaps of several li between each small tower, covering Imperial Court Blessed Land in accordance to each region of northern plains. During ordinary times, the small towers would be taking in the wild Gu within Imperial Court Blessed Land. As every 10-year period arrived, these small towers would start to sink one after another, sacrificing the wild Gu inside them while also resonating with the blizzard in the outside world to achieve a miraculous power. This power would carry out an enormous plundering of the whole of northern plains, taking in the precious Gu resources of northern plains to above the sacred palace in Imperial Court Blessed Land, and thus condensing floor after floor of 88 True Yang building. These floors would form on top of one another, finally forming the complete 88 True Yang building. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's plan had been rejected by Long Hair Ancestor. Long Hair Ancestor was a refinement path supreme grandmaster, and thought of an exquisite plan with a different approach, refining the current 88 True Yang building. Every time 88 True Yang building formed was a process of refining Gu once again. It not only made use of the wild Gu in the small towers but also the Gu worms absorbed into it. For example, Looking at the 68th floor, 88 True Yang building first absorbed Flying Bear strength Gu and refined it, using the strength of the Gu to form the 100th round. Again, absorbing other strong Gu worms to form the 99th round. Following was the 98th round, 97th. It was like building a high building, one must first build a strong foundation. If there were not qualified Gu worms, then 88 True Yang building would replace it with Gu recipe, primeval stones, inheritance secrets, and so on. Everyone knew the harder the rounds in 88 True Yang building were, the more bountiful the rewards would be. Conversely, the more bountiful the rewards or stronger the Gu worms, the more difficult the round would be. One could say every Gu worm assimilated into 88 True Yang building was a part of its structure. Countless imperial court contests passed by while countless generations of sagely immortals had been probing before the workings of this mechanism of 88 True Yang building were finally discovered. Originally, there were no flaws in this. But with the passing of time, changes started to appear which created a loophole, allowing Northern Plains Gu masters to exploit it. This loophole was in the aspect of refinement. 88 True Yang building plundered Northern Plains and absorbed Gu worms, refining them and using their strength to form rounds. What did Gu refinement rely on? Will. Back then, how did Fang Yuan refine the liquor worm? By using primeval essence as a carrier for the Gu master's will to continually wear down the Gu worm's will, until the Gu worm was filled with the Gu master's will, thoroughly turning into the Gu master's tool. When Fang Yuan refined Gu, he had used immortal Gu spring-autumn cicada to get the desired result at the least expense. If the Gu worms differ by 2 ranks or more, there would be suppression. Fang Yuan used spring-autumn cicada's aura to force the lower-ranked Gu worm's will to curl up at a corner, and then poured in his primeval essence and will straight into the Gu worm, swallowing the withdrawn Gu worm's will. 88 True Yang building was not a Gu master. How could it refine other Gu worms? Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, thus, intentionally left behind his will. Giant Sun's will. Fang Yuan had seen Giant Sun's will when he was refining the Gestalt steel before. It was genuinely majestic and vast like the sun. Comparatively speaking, the will Fang Yuan left behind after refining the Gestalt steel was as minute as an ant. 88 True Yang building refined Gu worms by using Giant Sun's will. Immortal Venerable were unrivaled, their wills were also similarly unrivaled and could easily extinguish other wills. Thus, 88 True Yang building had never encountered any problems when refining Gu worms. However, there was a problem. Wills were formed from thoughts. If there was not a soul to act as the carrier, continuous thinking would only lead to unceasing consumption. To resist such astonishing consumption, the will would often choose to hibernate. When Fang Yuan entered Water Pavilion, Mo Yao's will which was stored inside had awoken from her hibernation. Giant Sun's will might be vast as the sun, but Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had passed away for countless years now. The will was gradually unable to resist the power of time and also chose to hibernate. When Giant Sun's will went into hibernation, 88 True Yang building's Gu refinement speed slowed down. This reduction in speed caused a loophole to appear in 88 True Yang building. Chapter 594, Plan activated. Strong winds blew and snow wreaked havoc. Demon Blood Hill, which used to have dark red grass growing all over, was now a scene of whiteness. The lofty hill also had surrendered to the power of 10 years' blizzard, appearing weak as a baby. Roar, roar, roar. Enormous figures that were as tall as 30 feet, appeared and disappeared in the blizzard. These were monsters that only appeared during the blizzard, snow monsters. These snow monsters were stronger the larger their size. A 30 feet tall snow monster could battle a rank 3 Gu master. 40 feet tall had the strength of a rank 4 Gu master. And 50 feet tall had the terrifying power of a rank 5 Gu master. Following the blizzard, the snow monsters began to devastate the whole of Northern Plains. They slowly converged together and attacked several surviving areas of northern plains, bringing destruction to the dying humans and living beings. But there is a weakness to everything: snow monsters were snowmen's prey. Snowmen could rapidly propagate by devouring snow monsters' meat and blood, even prolonging their lifespan. He Bai and He Cheng stood on the summit of the Demon Blood Hill for a while. Their black robes were exceptionally conspicuous in the white snowy land. Beside them were corpses of hundreds of snow monsters. Unless snow monsters that had reached the height of 60 feet appeared, even in great numbers, they could only be trash, throwing away their lives when fighting Gu immortals. He Bai and He Cheng had already waited for a long time now. Suddenly, He Bai's expression shook as he got a response, his sharp gaze looking at his left. There, maelstrom of wind and snow started to form in the air. Within a blink of an eye, they turned one by one into whole giant hands formed from wind and snow, flying snow hand. After the enormous flying snow hands condensed completely, they grabbed at He Bai and He Cheng. We have been waiting for you." He Bai laughed brightly and flicked his finger repeatedly, sending out large numbers of rank 5 Gu worms. He Cheng also made his move. The enormous flying snow hands grabbed Gu worms and soon each of them clenched tightly. The snow hands crumbled apart while the Gu worms inside disappeared without a trace, captured tightly by a power that took them into Imperial Court Blessed Land. He Tribe's 2 Gu immortals did not resist in the slightest and let the Gu worms be taken by the flying snow hands. Such a situation lasted for a whole hour before all the rank 5 Gu worms were captured away. He Bai and He Cheng only then stopped, looking at each other with a smile before flying away rapidly, disappearing into the horizon in a blink of an eye. Support has arrived. After some time, He Lu Lan got a response. His gaze burned as he gazed above at 88 True Yang building. At the peak of the sacred palace, an aurora was shaking. The 68th floor was still condensing with the 100th round already being formed before. The still not formed 68th floor was only in its embryonic stage. The aurora around it continually shook like liquid, holding the large numbers of Gu worms captured just before from outside the blessed land. A part of these Gu worms were wild Gu, whereas a portion came from He Cheng and He Bai, 2 Gu immortals. 88 True Yang building chose the strongest among them to form the 99th round, 98th round. He Lu Lan carefully sensed it for a while before slightly frowning. The two from He tribes have already made their move, but that Xianxia is still biding his time. He had bribed Xianxia to reach an agreement. One of the contents of the agreement was Xianxia help him at a designated time period. However, Xianxia was not showing any signs of movement at present. The primary upload of this chapter happened on n/0/vel, b.j.n. He Lu Lan was displeased, immediately sending a letter through a Gu worm. Soon, he received the reply. In the letter, Xianxia complained about how the 2 Gu immortals from He tribe were pressuring him these days and how his snowman business had taken a dive, already running at a loss. He also added how he had already supported He Lu Lan with many rank 5 Gu for wooden chicken Gu some time ago. And it was beyond his power to send support now. Lies. He Lu Lan was furious, almost pinching this letter Gu to death. There is indeed no one good in the demonic path, they all are treacherous and sly bastards. But soon, He Lu Lan's anger subsided. Truthfully, he had predicted this. After all, he was only a mortal while Xianxia was a lofty Gu immortal. A mortal dealing with a Gu immortal was like an ant negotiating with an elephant. The two were simply not at the same level. If the Gu immortal refused to acknowledge and reneged back on the promise, the mortal could do nothing about it. He Lu Lan was secretly worried. The 68th floor was in the process of condensing, and the longer the time went by, the weaker the effect of a Gu immortal support would be. It seems, I need to first obtain wooden chicken Gu to make Xianxia help me, He Lu Lan sneered, immediately sending an order to convene everyone. Wooden Chicken Gu was on the 39th floor of 88 Truyang Building. For months now, He Lu Lan's efforts had been concentrated on this floor. He also had Shuesong Zi's help, thus the progress was very smooth, succeeding in pushing to the last round. Wooden Chicken Gu was exactly the reward for this final round. This last round, it was difficult in a sense, but it was also very simple. What it tested was patience in putting in effort over a long period of time. He Lu Lan had personally led people and attempted the round for 40 to 50 times altogether, now already having grasped its details. Every time, he would progress slightly and the accumulation of such progress gave shocking results. He was only a paper-thin distance away from success. This is good too. Grasping this 39th floor would raise the morale for when we tackle the 68th floor. He Lu Lan thought for a while and immediately took action. The next day, he mustered large numbers of people, convening all the Gu masters in the sacred palace, and held a pep rally. That very evening, he led everyone and successfully broke through the 100th round, obtaining rank 6 Immortal Gu Wooden Chicken. Just like He Lu Lan expected, the breakthrough of the round raised morale and fighting spirit greatly, sweeping away the haze of Tai by Yun Sheng's defeat. With Immortal Gu Wooden Chicken, He Lu Lan's confidence rose greatly and he used it to lure Shuesong Zi into helping him. 7 days later, the 68th floor had completely taken form. He Lu Lan impatiently led everyone to charge into the floor. However, after arriving at the floor, he did not tackle the rounds anxiously, instead commanding the Gu masters to spread out. Over 100 refinement path Gu masters were included in the troops. These people were all carefully selected and their loyalty could be trusted. Although they had not attained master level, they were elites. The refinement path Gu masters formed a round formation upon which He Lu Lan slowly walked into the center. He sat down cross-legged and took out the two-edge owner token. The two-edge owner token slowly flew into the air and at the same time, He Lu Lan's body also began to let out gray light. The light rays were sharp as needles, piercing into the air. Not only He Lu Lan, the remaining refinement path Gu masters also let out sharp gray radiance. These needle-sharp light rays continued to strengthen, becoming thicker and longer, flooding the whole round formation. The individual needle-sharp rays started to touch each other, instantly linking together. A giant gray radiance slowly stretched out from the round formation, directly piercing into the two-edge owner token which was floating in the air. Outside the round formation were large numbers of Gu masters spectating this while guarding against emergencies. What are they doing? A young Gu master asked in confusion. An aged senior beside him patted his shoulder. Hee, this is the ability of super tribes. Kid, watch properly, the next scene will make your eyes open and jaw fall down. As he was saying this, the owner token suddenly shook. The tremor was weak, but following the dissemination of the giant sharp gray radiance, the scope of the tremor quickly increased. By the time this tremor spread to the round formation, it had already become a heavy tremor. The gray light rays condensed in the round formation like a light lake. From this heavy tremor, the lake suddenly erupted with dazzling light, forcing everyone to narrow their eyes. The gray light shone on every corner of the first round's area. Just like the melting of snow, the world in the round gradually started turning transparent before completely dissipating. It was like a cover had been lifted, and as if the second layer underneath was revealed, He Lu Lan and the group arrived at the second round. This is. We actually passed the round without even making a move. After a moment of silence, many young Gu masters started making a big fuss. That young Gu master from just before had eyes wide open and his jaw hanging down. What in the world is this method? The aged Gu master beside replied with satisfaction, this is a refinement path killer move that all super tribes have, Gray Meltdown. It can be used to rapidly pass rounds in 88 Truyang Building. Kid, the scope of your vision should have expanded, right? The young Gu master, whose vision was expanded, nodded his head non-stop and praised, "Amazing. Truly an amazing method. But, what do they need us for with such a method in their disposal?" The aged Gu master's smile turned forced. "This method is not effective every time. Some rounds can be crossed with this method, while some cannot. TSK, this trick is quite interesting." In Fang Yuan's mind, Mo Yao revealed her body. Her posture was enchanting and her eyes had a hint of seduction. She mumbled to herself in an analytical way, "This should be digging into the hibernating will of giant sun's control, attacking with coordination from both outside and inside." The Gu masters outside the blessed land would release Gu at certain places, and these Gu worms would be absorbed into 88 true Yang building, refined into the rounds. But giant sun's will is hibernating, so the speed in refining the Gu worms has become slower. At best, they could only be considered half-refined. The so-called killer move Gray Meltdown uses the owner token to connect with the half-refined Gu worms. As such, the core of the round will be directly refined. The round will naturally not be able to continue anymore and switch to the next round. To do this, the crucial key is time. The state of the half-refined Gu won't continue for long. Even if giant sun's will is hibernating, as long as there is sufficient time, it will completely refine these Gu worms. In the case that these Gu worms are refined, the Gu masters tackling the round cannot induce any reaction and the chance to forcibly refine them would be thoroughly lost. You are indeed a refinement path grandmaster, being able to analyze so thoroughly with just a glance. Fang Yuan laughed in his mind, not stinting on his praise towards Mo Yao. To speak bluntly, this method was fighting with 88 true Yang building to refine the Gu worms. If giant sun's will was awake, the Gu worms would be refined instantly, not leaving behind any opportunity. But it was hibernating now, the refinement had become slow and as such, there was a loophole that could be used. Fang Yuan was from the future, thus he knew this clearly. In his previous life, after Central Continent's Gu immortals had broken through Imperial Court Blessed Land, they had shown this method in the image clips they had disseminated everywhere. But this method could only be used as support. What Central Continent's Gu immortals truly relied on was still the glass owner token. This secondary owner token could be considered a divine treasure. Who knew how much energy and resources Central Continent's forces had to spend for it, and now it was in Fang Yuan's possession, raised to 6 edges. Taking advantage of everyone concentrating on the second round, Fang Yuan secretly took out the 6-edge owner token. He stroked the 6 edges of the owner token inside, muttering inwardly, "Such a long time of planning and now it is finally time for the plan to begin in full. Flying Bear Strength Gu with my Flying Bear Phantom Gu, isn't that what it should be? I also think so." With that and a thought in his mind, he instantly grasped control over this floor. Chapter 595, Green Vines Blocking the Round, Fang Yuan's Backstab. He Lulan gazed ahead at the troops making slow progress in the dense jungle. The intense battle had already lasted for over 6 hours. This was the second round, the weather here was hot and damp, and the terrain was a vast ancient rainforest. To cross this round, Gu masters needed to traverse through the whole jungle and reach a stone palace at the other side. However, this jungle could not be taken lightly. There might not be any beasts in the jungle, but it was full of green vines. These green vines were coiled around tall trees and piled up on the damp ground. Every green vine had the thickness of a king-sized bowl and length of 70 to 80 feet in the minimum. The common green vines among these were called green snake vines, which had snake scales growing all over their surface. And when Gu masters neared them, the vines would suddenly move and coil around the Gu masters, constricting them to death. In every 100 paces of the rainforest, there were about 1,000 green snake vines, filling the whole area. The difficulty in progressing forward was thus extremely high. The whole journey was filled with green snake vines attacking from all sides, some shot down from sky, some creeped through the ground and some ambushed from under the ground, causing the group to struggle and not be able to defend properly. The group's progress was met with attacks from the green vines at all times, seemingly like they were among an ocean of green vines. The green vine had powerful attacks and quick speed. Even more dangerous were the wood-path goo worms that lived on their bodies. It was precisely because of these goo worms that the group had suffered huge casualties. Reporting, we have discovered a green snake vine king ahead. Currently, Lord Yi Lui Sang is already in a fight with it. After a while of moving forward, an investigative goo master returned from the front group to report to He Lulan. He Lulan nodded, still continuing with his slow movement. In every group of green snake vines, there was a green snake vine king which had the battle strength of a rank 4 goo master. However, Yi Lui Sang was a rank 5 peak stage expert, the current tribe leader of the super force Yi Lui tribe, and the fire path he cultivated subdued wood path goo worms completely. There was also the fire path support type immortal goo on him, taking care of a green snake vine king was a cinch. Sure enough, after a while, the report of victory came from ahead. Lord Yi Lui Sang has eliminated the green snake vine king and has now retreated from the front lines. Lord Chang Shan has switched with him and is leading the wolf group to open the path. Okay. He Lulan lightly replied. Wolves were good at offense and not at defense, and were not a good match for the vines. But Chang Shan had defense-specialized wolves like turtleback wolves. He also had vermilion fire wolves upon which lived fire path goo worms. In this situation, they were a sharp weapon to cut open the path. Wolf King is truly powerful, he can even be said to have the number 1 battle strength. Especially when he also has the Flying Bear Phantom Immortal Goo, a mere minor round cannot obstruct him. He Lulan pondered while walking. Flying Bear Phantom Goo and Flying Bear Strength Goo, if the two are paired up, that would be perfect. Humph, I will first make Chang Shan pour in his utmost effort for me, and when the time is ripe, I must make him hand over that Flying Bear Phantom Goo. As long as I become a Goo Immortal, wouldn't a mere Wolf King be mine to toy with? This second round seemingly tests the Goo Master's strength in doing prolonged battles, but more than that, it is actually testing investigative ability. In this jungle, there are not only the green snake vine groups, but also green dragon vine groups. Green dragon vines are dozens of times more terrifying than green snake vines, they are mutated beings among plants. The path we took avoided these green dragon vines as much as possible. There are only 1 or 2 territories of green dragon vines in this path, and presumably there will be 1 or 2 tough battles, and that will be the greatest difficulty of this round. He Lulan felt proud, we are getting closer to the finish line, at this speed, we will cross this round in an hour. He had just thought of this when suddenly a change occurred. Swish swish. The green snake vines around the group suddenly penetrated the air with terrifying speed, even producing sonic booms. The offense of the vines had suddenly increased by dozens of times. The previous battles were the ones where the Goo Masters fought with the green snake vines nearby while the vines outside the range stayed still. But now, the green vines within 100 li, no, 1,000 li, were engaging in the battle, surging out crazily like a tsunami as they pounced towards the Goo Masters. The Goo Masters were caught unprepared, immediately suffering heavy losses. Countless Goo Masters were killed within a few moments of time. How could this happen? The green snake vines are rioting all of a sudden. The experts shouted in fright. Someone, save me quickly. Surrounding Goo Masters were wantonly constricted and twisted apart by the green vine group. I command all troops to attack, hold them off no matter the consumption. If we can't hold them back, it will be our death. He Lulan shouted and rose to the air, attempting to control the situation. Soon, 100 or so green dragon vines rose to the sky, charging towards him. He Lu Lan gave a shout of fury and used his dark path abilities, killing 20 to 30 green dragon vines instantly before moving towards the ground. But the ground was also not safe. Countless green snake vines and green dragon vines broke through the soil, trapping the entirety of the troops. How can this be? The scouting had been done properly. How could we encounter a green dragon vine group here? The corners of He Lu Lan's eyes were threatening to tear as he could not make sense of this no matter what. Green vines were strongly territorial. But as long as one does not encroach upon their territory, they would remain still and not take the initiative to attack. These green vine groups, however, had completely gone crazy, pouncing upon the Gu masters like they had killed their father. Green vines possessed strong vitality, and even if they were cut into 5 to 6 parts, these 5 to 6 parts could still attack before dying. He Lu Lan even saw many green dragon vines struggling free from their root systems, and flying out to attack. How is this possible? What the hell is happening? He Lu Lan could not make sense of it no matter how he thought. By cutting off their own roots, these green dragon vines were looking for their own death. All living things possessed survival instinct. How deep a hatred was it for them to erupt in such bitter suicidal attacks? The large army was broken apart, each fighting for themselves while slowly starting to retreat bit by bit. In a moment, many youths lost their lives. Could it be this second round is actually a giant trap? This is too strange. This is only the second round. How could its difficulty be so high? He Lu Lan was dumbstruck, a huge doubt rising in his heart. This was indeed a huge trap. But the one who laid this trap was not 88 True Yang Building but the one in control of this floor, Fang Yuan. He had been patient, ordering the green vines everywhere in this round to stealthily move here. He then accepted the command to participate in the front line and switched with others from time to time, intentionally lowering the speed of progress to stall for time. When large numbers of green vines had gathered, Fang Yuan immediately ordered a surprise attack without any hesitation. The Gu masters suffered disastrous losses because of the ambush. Fang Yuan was an enslavement path master. The green vines, which had lower intelligence than beasts, coordinated together under his control, and disregarded their own lives to burst out with 100 times their normal strength. Especially for the experts like He Lu Lan, Yi Lui Sang and Tai Bai Yun Sheng, he had paid even more attention and mobilized green dragon vines which were comparable to mutated beasts, to obstruct them. Retreat, retreat quickly. There are green vines everywhere around us. If we continue on, the casualties will become even more severe. Lord He Tribe Leader, my tribe leader requests to retreat. Several large tribes hurriedly sent their representatives. Anyone could see they had landed into an ambush by the green vine groups. How could the green vines become so sinister? Right now, no one had the time to tackle this issue. He Lu Lan fiercely gnashed his teeth, his face showed a struggling expression several times before he squeezed out a word, retreat. He also knew the situation was already out of control. The green vines were charging without fearing death and had already led the formation to turn chaotic. And the experts were not able to fight properly for the fear of hurting their own men. If they suffered such serious casualties in the second round, then how could He Lu Lan have the power to seize the immortal Gu in the last round? Retreat was naturally a wise move, but it would depend on whether Fang Yuan would allow it. He was in control of this floor, sealing the exit and entrance was only a small thing. Soon, everyone made a terrifying discovery: they could not leave. This discovery was a huge blow on the morale. The whole army seemed to be about to crumble apart. At the crucial moment, He Lu Lan felt the situation going awry and stood up, his voice spreading everywhere. All of you, persevere. I will use the killer move Grey Meltdown to forcibly cross this round. If we persevere, we will win, we will survive. The despairing Gu masters heard these words and felt like they were drowning men who had found a life-saving straw. The morale that had fallen to the bottom did not crumble in the end and instead stabilized. Everyone again started fighting, opening a path and forming a tight and connected formation. Under the heavy protection from all the troops, He Lu Lan led a group of Refinement Path Gu masters to form a round formation and began to use the killer move Grey Meltdown. Lord, if we forcibly activate it, we will probably lose 30% of our men. An old Refinement Path Gu master who was familiar with the inside information advised He Lu Lan with a pale face. The killer move Grey Meltdown naturally had its limitations. This killer move relied on the coordination of the inside and outside. This required the reward of the round to be Gu worms deliberately provided by either He tribe's Gu immortals or Xianxia. But 88 True Yang building would not coordinate, it only chose the suitable Gu worms from those absorbed and refined them to form the rounds. The first round's reward were Gu worms that came from He Bai. Thus, He Lu Lan could use the killer move Grey Meltdown to exploit giant suns while still not having fully refined the Gu worms, to forcibly refine them. Like this, he would get the reward and pass the round. But the second round's Gu worm reward was Wild Gu. He Lu Lan was unable to connect with these Wild Gu and the killer move Grey Meltdown could not be used. The second round could only in accordance with this be completed by going through its requirement. But the current situation was critical. He Lu Lan was left without a better option but to forcibly activate killer move Grey Meltdown to skip through the second round and connect to the Gu worm reward of the third round. The third round's Gu worm reward came from Xianxia. The Gu worm was only half refined, thus still contained most of Xianxia's will. As He Lu Lan was working together with Xianxia's will approved him. He could thus use Grey Meltdown to connect to the third round's reward and refine it. As such, the third round would be passed. And when the third round is crossed, the second round would have no foundation, collapsing apart. Because when 88 True Yang building condensed each floor, it would first form the 100th round, then 99th round, 98th round. However, if He Lu Lan did so, the killer move Grey Meltdown's power would increase by several times, far surpassing the amount these Refinement Path Gu masters could bear. Whether it was success or failure, a portion of the Refinement Path Gu masters would not be able to bear it and die. Tens of Refinement Path Gu masters dying is better than the whole army dying. He Lu Lan gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with chilly and cruel light. The situation had forced him to choose the lesser of the two evils. The old Gu master did not say any more and retreated back to the formation. Chapter 596, Preparations from Long Ago, Mo Yao's Shock and Suspicion. The Refinement Path Gu masters had solemn expressions while quickly moving into formation. Gray rays of light gradually blossomed and merged into one. Under everyone's expectant gaze, He Lu Lan waved his hand and threw the two-edge owner token into the air. The owner token floated in midair, and the giant gray radiance which had been condensed in the round formation shot towards the owner token. The gray radiance was so dazzling that one could not look at it directly. This is the moment. Fang Yuan had been observing this from the outside, and sent a thought at this time. The two-edge owner token immediately disappeared, landing in his hand the next moment. He was in control of this floor. Teleporting a small owner token was as simple as breathing. Without the owner token, the gray radiance immediately collapsed and the killer move Grey Meltdown forcibly ended. The Refinement Path Gu masters in the round formation gave a frightened howl, puffing out blood, with almost all of them dying from the backlash in that instant. B1N Realm was the platform where this chapter was initially revealed on N0v3L.B1N. Spurt. He Lu Lan, who was in the center of the formation, was no exception to this, spurting out a mouthful of blood and retreating back several large steps like he had received a heavy impact. My owner token. He lost his self-control and howled with an extremely shocked, angered and doubtful expression. Everyone was also stupefied by this change. Sun Shirhan was baffled, Tang Miaoming covered her mouth and Pei Yanfei was also despondent. Even Mo Yao's will was raving in Fang Yuan's mind, "Brat, what did you do? His owner token has no more than 2 edges now. Adding in your 6 edges, it is only 8 edges. What are you in such a hurry for? Wouldn't it be good if you had waited for his owner token to rise to 4 edges? You don't know shit." Fang Yuan sneered and under the cover of his large sleeve, calmly put away the 2-edge owner token. The whole process happened under the bystanders' gazes, but it was completed in total secret without incurring any suspicion. What the hell happened? Yi Luisang rushed towards He Lu Lan with a fretful expression and asked, "Where is the owner token?" How would I know? He Lu Lan's eyes seemed to shoot out flames of anger, his voice raised an octave higher as he burst out with foul language, "What the f***ck happened?" In the past records of history, there had never been a situation where the owner token suddenly disappeared. Grey Meltdown had been used so many times by all the large forces and the winners in the past, how could it suddenly fade away in He Lu Lan's hand? Damn it, how do we go on without the owner token? Fang Yuan also hurried over at this moment, his brows were furrowed into a knot and he had a genuine and heavily anxious expression, making others sympathize with him. The killer move which everyone had placed high hopes on failed at the crucial moment. The 2-edge owner token was also inexplicably lost. The Green Vine's offensive was becoming more fierce like a flash flood, not giving anyone the time for a breather. Morale had fallen to the abyss and many started fleeing in disorder. "It's over, we are done for," Shi Shui mumbled. "Will I die in this place? Is this the final ending?" Tai Bai Yunsheng laughed bitterly. In this recent period, he was being tormented by his conscience and his body looked extremely weak and thin. However, the next moment, someone shouted in joy, "We can leave." Someone left. "We can leave." Fang Yuan did not want to get rid of all these people in one go and left a lifeline, allowing the Gu masters to freely enter and exit this floor. If He tribe was completely annihilated, he would definitely attract the all-out revenge of He tribe's Gu immortals. Moreover, Fang Yuan still required Tai Bai Yunsheng to refine landscape as before Gu. Therefore the collapsed and despairing army started retreating. "I am actually alive. This time was too terrifying, I don't want to enter there again." "Boo hoo hoo, father, you died so miserably." The plaza around the Truyang building became a scene of gloomy misery. He Lu Lan had convened a large army and entered the tower with grand and vigorous momentum, but such a change while leaving the tower was beyond the expectations of almost everyone. He Lu Lan's expression was ashen as he glanced at the plaza before leaving without any words. He tribesmen followed behind him, silent and heads lowered. Yi Luisang heaved a long sigh and shook his head, leaving the plaza. Tai Bai Yunsheng had a complex expression as he looked at He Lu Lan's receding figure. After this expedition, it will probably be difficult to form a presentable party within a short period of time. Tai Bai Yunsheng was wrong. The very next day, He Lu Lan again formed a large army and attacked the second round. So what if he lost the owner token? Even if he could not use Grey Meltdown, he could use brute force to pass the round. He Lu Lan had deceived 2 great Gu immortals in his pledge to take revenge, he could no longer turn back. He must force himself to continue on. However, during the night of the defeat, Fang Yuan had quietly entered 88 Truyang building. "You are too impatient, you now only have 8 edges. What can you do now?" Mo Yao sneered in his mind. Fang Yuan walked slowly along the secret treasury corridor while gently touching the crystal wall, looking on as treasure after treasure swept past his gaze. He had a slight smile on his face, replying calmly to Mo Yao's will, "You are an impressive refinement path grandmaster, a fairy of spirit affinity house, just speak clearly if you want to ask, why probe so superficially?" Mo Yao heard this and immediately changed her expression, smiling coquettishly, "Young man, looks like you already have a plan." "That goes without saying." Fang Yuan's steps paused and he lightly stroked the right crystal wall, taking out a treasure stored within. Ever since he had refined the Gestalt steel, he could take out any treasures around this distance. Fang Yuan walked a few steps further and took out 3 goo worms on top of that. He then moved to the left crystal wall and took out the objects within. As this went on, Fang Yuan had taken out tens of goo recipes, over 100 goo worms, all kinds of information on inheritances and over 20 documents on cultivation insights. Fang Yuan kept around 80 of the goo worms outside while sending the rest into storage goo worms. Mo Yao had observed the whole process quietly, getting more curious as time went on. These goo worms that Fang Yuan left out here did not match together, she really could not tell what he was doing. The video of Central Continent's Gu immortals attacking Imperial Court Blessed Land in his previous life appeared in Fang Yuan's mind. There were altogether 11 Gu immortals who attacked Imperial Court Blessed Land, men and women, each with extraordinary presence. A female immortal was the leader, a domineering aura lingered around her which pressured people. Other Gu immortals were cautious and respectful towards her. She was known as Fairy Black Moon. A half-mask covered her nose, mouth and cheeks, only revealing the upper half of her face which showed her strong contours, sharp and long brows, bright eyes and a heroic aura. A dark gold armor covered her whole body, bringing a heavy feeling of suppression on any that looked at it. Fang Yuan's current actions were replicating Fairy Black Moon's actions to the smallest details. The treasures he took out were actually of great background. Countless years back, Central Continent's Gu immortals sent outstanding Gu masters to infiltrate into northern plains. The Gu masters would pass some rounds with high-grade evaluation, entering the treasure room and arranging these treasures here. The whole process consumed close to a millennium. Fang Yuan walked past the Gestalt steel, and walked over 300 steps into the long crystal corridor before stopping. "It is here." He looked around him and after confirming it, began to put the Gu worms he had taken earlier into the crystal wall. Whether it was left or right, top or under his feet, they were placed in a certain pattern. As for the original treasures within the crystal wall, Fang Yuan took some, left some and shifted the position of some. This, could it be? Mo Yao was bewildered. She had been watching carefully and had gradually inferred some clues with her refinement path Grandmaster attainment. In the range of tens of steps, after Fang Yuan's adjustments, the Gu worms in the crystal wall had ingeniously formed a formation. Right, this is precisely the refinement path killer move Grey Meltdown. No, to be even more exact, this killer move originates from Grey Meltdown but its effects are much stronger. Fang Yuan chuckled. "What in the world are you trying to do?" Mo Yao asked. Fang Yuan's gazed eerily, a confident smile appearing on his face. "Just watch." He then sent out several Gu worms which floated in the air. The Gu worms in the surrounding walls started to shake slightly one by one. Dust seemed to rise up in the air. The dust gradually became denser till it formed a thick grey fog. The grey fog kept on accumulating and soon entirely submerged Fang Yuan. He could not even see his own hands. Fang Yuan stood within the grey fog with his eyes closed and his right hand clutching the six-edge owner token, as he tried to carefully sense something. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and shouted, "Come back, fixed immortal travel." Rumble. The crystal corridor shook strongly and 88 True Yang building had a sudden tremor. The 21st floor where 17 rounds still remained, disintegrated into nothingness. The rewards for the 17 rounds penetrated through space and appeared before Fang Yuan. Among them, one Gu worm was dispelling a rank 6 aura, shining with a green gem-like luster, and flying elegantly like a green jade butterfly. Its powerful presence pushed the rest of the Gu worms to the side. What else could it be but fixed immortal travel? Immortal Gu. This is fixed immortal travel. Mo Yao blurted out. Fang Yuan stored the other rewards into storage Gu worms while the immortal Gu fixed immortal travel was left outside, sitting on his shoulder. Immortal Gu fixed immortal travel was a rank 6 Gu and at its peak state, his mortal aperture could not store it. Fang Yuan had not stored Flying Bear Phantom Gu either, instead directly holding it in his pocket. There is one more. Fang Yuan licked his lips in excitement. Another explosive sound rang out. 88 Truyang Building shook greatly, the 12 remaining rounds of the 34th floor were immediately passed. The rewards appeared in front of Fang Yuan out of thin air and one Gu among them, an immortal Gu that looked like nothing special, just like a lump of earth, it was. Immortal Gu Gruel Mud. Mo Yao's will blurted out the name. Fang Yuan laughed and stored the other rewards while putting the gruel mud into his pouch. Back then, he had buried fixed immortal travel and gruel mud deep under the ground, waiting for this precise moment. When 88 Truyang Building condensed, it plundered the whole of northern plains. This was the arrangement of an immortal venerable, his might extended up into the heavens and down into the abyss, nothing could stop his overwhelming force. Immortal Gu Wooden Chicken had escaped the pursuit of Shui Song Zi and Heibai, but was still captured by 88 Truyang Building in the end. The wild immortal Gu ended up like that while Fang Yuan's meticulously buried immortal Gu did not even have the will to resist, and were naturally collected by 88 Truyang Building. After the capture, they were placed separately as the last rewards for the 21st and 34th floor. But due to giant suns while being in hibernation, the two immortal Gu had all along been in a half-refined state, just as Fang Yuan had planned for. Brat, who in the world are you? Humph, this is not a small arrangement. You were actually able to mobilize two immortal Gu. Tell me, which region are you from, which force sent you here? Mo Yao was unable to hold back after she saw this, and began to ask questions after questions. Chapter 597, True Inheritance Secluded Domain, Unexpected Event. The appearance of two great immortal Gu was way out of her expectations. Mo Yao was very surprised. What was even more scary was, Fang Yuan had made ample preparations. The Gu worms he used were originally treasures kept inside the crystal walls. His killer move was even more perfect than Grey Meltdown, and had stronger effect. To get to this point, it was not something a single person could achieve. In fact, this could not be achieved with merely decades of setup. Huge amounts of strength and effort needed to be invested, at least hundreds of years of infiltration in order to hide all the Gu worms inside the crystal walls, and to prevent the Gu worms from being taken away by people, they needed to prepare several of each Gu. All in all, this was not something a person or an ordinary force could accomplish, it had to be a super force with Gu immortals at least. Against Mo Yao's suspicion, Fang Yuan smiled lightly and did not speak. All these were the setup of Central Continent's Gu immortals. But Mo Yao had died long ago, her will was slumbering within Water Pavilion and was unaware of the changes in the outside world. Fang Yuan was someone who had been reborn, he had a huge advantage, using the Gu immortals setup, he could accomplish all of this successfully. To speak the truth, he should thank those Central Continent Gu immortals who went around to distribute the footage. Without the guidance of this clip, Fang Yuan would not be so sure of the inside information of 88 Truyang Building. His method was inherently the same as He Lu Lan's, but Fang Yuan was sensing his own immortal Gu, while He Lu Lan was sensing other people's mortal Gu. Refining an immortal Gu was at least 100 times as difficult as refining a mortal Gu, thus, Fang Yuan was not in such a rush for time unlike He Lu Lan. The two immortal Gu were constantly in a state of half-refinement. N0V3LTR0VE served as the original host for this chapter's release on N0V3LB1N. Most importantly, the refinement path killer move that Fang Yuan activated was the revised version of Grey Meltdown that Central Continent's Gu immortals had painstakingly researched in. It had an amazing effect, freeing the Gu master and saving them the trouble of facing backlash as 88 Truyang Building would be the one enduring the pressure. At the same time, he had to thank all of the Gu masters who charged through the rounds enthusiastically. If the rounds were intact, Fang Yuan would need to traverse 100 rounds to communicate with the immortal Gu. It would be filled with difficulty. But there were only 17 rounds left on the 21st floor, and the 34th floor had even fewer rounds, at 12. After Fang Yuan successfully took the 2 immortal Gu, these 2 floors were passed automatically. He took out the 2 owner tokens. The glass owner token was still at 6 edges, after all it was a cheat item and was not authentic. Meanwhile, the owner token snatched from He Lu Lan had turned from 2 edges to 4 edges. Combining the two, they were 10 edges. 10 edges, that meant that Fang Yuan had met the minimum requirements to receive an immortal venerable inheritance. Immortal venerable inheritance. Fang Yuan chuckled. According to what was shown in the footage, he combined the 2 owner tokens and created the 10-edge owner token. Swoosh. The next moment, he vanished on the spot. The scenery before him changed drastically. When Fang Yuan finally reacted, he found himself in an area of void. The surroundings were pure darkness, there was neither heaven or earth. Fang Yuan was floating silently in the air. Several traces of green or red starlight shone from far away. This is 88 True Yang Building's true inheritance secluded domain. To think that after so many years, I can come here again. Mo Yao's will was surprisingly dejected and downcast, as she muttered to herself. You've been here before. Fang Yuan's heart jumped. Back then, I'm not going to talk about it. It is your greatest fortune to be able to come here. Although with 10 edges, you can only receive the lowest grade ordinary true inheritance. But this will not hinder you from gaining some knowledge and experience. What you are going to see will surely broaden your vision, you will never forget it. In just a moment, Mo Yao's will went back to normal. Fang Yuan laughed. Mo Yao's arrogant tone did not make him angry, in fact he nodded in agreement. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, I cannot compare to him yet. Today, this will indeed hugely broaden my vision. Saying this, he waved his hands like he was swimming in water, moving his body forward slowly. In the video from Central Continent in his previous life, there were many details omitted during this period. Central Continent's Gu Immortals invested more heavily than Fang Yuan, they used more than 10 Immortal Gu to raise the owner token to 43 edges. They gained a lot, but all of the gains were concealed. Such an act was no doubt a defensive measure to prevent attracting the greed of the viewers. This, however, increased Fang Yuan's interest and anticipation towards Giant Sun's true inheritances. He followed after a blood-red starlight, getting closer to it. As he got closer, the starlight became brighter, and eventually, Fang Yuan stopped before a round circular light. This lump of red starlight was the size of a bowl, silently floating around. This is an ordinary true inheritance. If you want to understand the contents, you just need to let your consciousness enter it. Mo Yao advised at the appropriate timing. Fang Yuan was carefully navigating with his mind, as images flashed before him. A grand and huge ancient forest. Ancient and tall trees, beasts at the size of mountains. Ha ha ha. A person with a broad shoulder and thin waist was laughing with his head facing up. His image was blurred, but his skin was covered in rainbow colors, as ancient totems of every description were carved on it. His dominating presence pervaded heaven and earth. He stepped on the gray clouds and treaded strong winds, his purple hair was fluttering as there were seemingly flames burning within his double pupil eyes. Fang Yuan saw this and his heart was pounding, he could feel difficulty breathing. He recognized this person immediately. This is one of the 3 demon venerables of the olden antiquity era, reckless savage demon venerable. He is facing the immemorial desolate beast, primordial ash owl. Strange, why is there a demon venerable's item within Giant Sun's inheritances? What's so strange about this? Giant Sun Immortal Venerable was the venerable of an era, the supreme ruler of heaven and earth, the invincible being in the universe. He searched the entire world and obtained an item of reckless savage demon venerable, placing it inside his building for his descendants. This is very normal. Mo Yao said. Immemorial desolate beast, overlords that had existed within heaven and earth since the immemorial era, they had rank 8 Gu immortal battle strength. This primordial ash owl had a bird head and beast body, it had 2 pairs of golden pupils and a dragon's horn on its head. Its muscular body was covered in thick rainbow feathers, its bestial aura could overwhelm the world. Its limbs moved quickly, and could easily destroy mountains and rivers. With one growl, its voice could travel 10,000 li, causing ripples in the air of the entire world. Reckless savage demon venerable praised, good beast. The primordial ash owl had intelligence that could rival men, it got angry upon hearing that, shooting out thunder like that of the heavens from its mouth, the blue thunderbolt shot out and pierced 10,000 li into the sky, instantly arriving before reckless savage demon venerable. Fang Yuan's expression changed, the magnitude of the lightning and thunder was beyond his imagination. Right now he was like an ant, but even if it was his Gu immortal self from his past life, he could not survive for 3 breaths' time from this. But reckless savage demon venerable did not move at all, he allowed the frenzied thunderbolt to hit his body directly. From within the electricity, his bronze-colored body was intact, shining brightly. His muscles were like stone blocks, and all the totems on his body were like living beings, as all sorts of fierce beasts were roaming on his body. From within the exploding lightning plasma, reckless savage demon venerable's face showed an expression of enjoyment. He laughed heartily as he punched with his right fist. Bam! Immediately, heaven and earth changed colors, as winds and clouds moved violently. The lightning vanished slowly, mountains were trembling, and forests were weeping. With just one punch, the intense winds blew like an apocalypse, the clouds in the sky vanished, the heavens were stripped bare, and permeating sunlight dispelled all darkness. Just one punch. With the intensity of the force that repelled ghosts and deities, the primordial ash owl was crying out pitifully. It was an immemorial desolate beast, an overlord of a region, it was untamable and wild earlier, giving off a strong aura, but the next moment, its bones were crushed to bits as its rainbow feathers floated in the air, its golden pupils were full of fear and it laid on the ground, like a dead dog. Fang Yuan was completely moved, this was the first time he had seen the attack of a venerable. Reckless savage demon venerable, with the prowess of rank 9, he was truly invincible in all heaven and earth. 9999th Ash Owl. Reckless savage demon venerable said plainly, opening his palm and grabbing the air. The next moment, the primordial ash owl was held by a formless strength. It was like a chicken that was grabbed by a butcher, it was helpless and was shrieking for help. Transform. Reckless savage demon venerable's body shuddered, he expanded along with the wind, becoming a giant in an instant. What a true giant! He was as tall as heaven and earth, as if he could grab the sun if he wished. No tribulations could move him, as he could barely be held by the universe itself. The giant slowly opened his mouth, as the primordial ash owl struggled intensely, and yet to no avail as it was sent into the giant's mouth. The giant swallowed in one mouthful, chewing several times with a sound as if a mountain collapsed, lightning striking everywhere, it was loud as thunder. With a gulp, the giant sent the primordial ash owl into its stomach. He actually ate an immemorial desolate beast, a rank 8 level existence, just like that. The prowess of reckless savage, it was truly terrifying. After eating this rank 8 desolate beast, the giant patted his stomach, the sound was loud as thunder but his expression was like he did not have enough. And on his belly, there was a new totem, in the form of the primordial ash owl, but among the innumerable totems on his body, it was not eye-catching. The giant seemed to have sensed something as he suddenly turned around and looked straight at Fang Yuan. Ugh! Fang Yuan fell on the ground like he had suffered a huge blow, vomiting out a mouthful of blood in the process. His soul was trembling intensely, a strong sense of dizziness assaulted him, only recovering after a long time. Gasp, gasp, gasp. He breathed roughly, barely opening his eyes. His eyes could not take it either, as two streams of bloody tears flowed out, flowing from his face towards the ground. But thankfully, this place did not restrict Gu worms, such an injury could be easily healed with Gu worms. This is the test of the inheritance. Fang Yuan healed himself as he asked. He, what sort of test is this? In his mind, Mo Yao was gloating, replying in an arrogant tone, this inheritance has a trace of reckless savage demon venerables will within it, only Gu immortals could withstand it. But after getting this inheritance, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had already modified it such that mortals could endure it. You owe it to Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's mercy that you are still alive. Fang Yuan snorted coldly, his mercy is only towards his bloodline descendants, what does that have to do with me? Anyway, Giant Sun true inheritances are not so easy to obtain, there is great danger inside. That is of course the case. But you have already survived this test, and remember that this true inheritance is only an ordinary true inheritance. With the 10-edge owner token, you already have the authority to inherit it. Mo Yao said. As expected, when Fang Yuan's mind entered, the red light lump opened its doors, as reckless savage demon venerable's figure did not appear again. Primordial Ash Owl Transformation. Fang Yuan realized now that this was a transformation path killer move. This killer move could allow a Gu immortal to transform into the primordial Ash Owl, gaining a huge boost in strength. Reckless Savage Demon Venerable was the progenitor of Strength Path, but he was also the creator of Transformation Path. His strength could shake heaven and earth, he was the fiercest Venerable out of the 10. At the same time, he could transform into countless fierce beasts, having an endless number of transformations, and he could even revive from a drop of blood. Fang Yuan did not hesitate, he let go of the red light lump and allowed it to fly away from him. Although the true inheritance was precious, it did not suit him currently. Fang Yuan was very calm, and held even more expectations. To think that within Giant Sun's true inheritances, there would be something involving reckless savage demon venerable, and this particular inheritance was only the lowest grade ordinary true inheritance. He could not imagine what other ordinary true inheritances there could be. As for the even greater unparalleled true inheritance, what would they be? He moved his arms and swam towards another area within this silent and dark void. Chapter 598, 3 Olds, 3 True Inheritances, Using Will. This lump of jade light was harder to get closer to compared to the red light from before. It was flying slowly, continuously twisting and turning, as Fang Yuan chased after it for a while before managing to grab it. It was also as large as a bowl, and Fang Yuan's consciousness carefully entered it. An unspeakable force of vibration spread from the jade green light into Fang Yuan's body. Be careful, this is old immortal Kong Ju's item. In his mind, Mo Yao's will recognize this item and warned. Don't worry, it cannot escape. Fang Yuan's tone was certain, he grabbed onto this light lump tightly. Idiot, I am not referring to that. Quickly let go. Mo Yao said this, but it was already too late. The mystical vibration spread from within the jade light, all the way into Fang Yuan's aperture. Fang Yuan's aperture started vibrating. In his 90% filled aperture waves were crashing violently. Swish swish swish. The huge waves crashed on the surrounding aperture walls, the rank 5 peak stage crystal clear walls were starting to develop cracks from the pressure of the waves. Fang Yuan was shocked. This true inheritances test was very peculiar, it was hard to defend against, it actually directly affected the Gu Master's aperture. Lad, quickly cut off your arms using Gu worms. Only by making a sacrifice can you save your life. Mo Yao's will shouted in Fang Yuan's mind. Cut off my arms. Fang Yuan's expression sank, sweat was forming on his forehead. He tried letting go of it, but this lump of jade light gave off an extremely strong suction force, keeping Fang Yuan's hands tightly attached to it. Fang Yuan could not get free from it, and the vibrations in his aperture were getting stronger. I got it. In the moment of crisis, Fang Yuan had an inspiration as he quickly moved the primeval essence in his second aperture into his first aperture. The vibration moved into the second aperture through the primeval essence. The second aperture also started vibrating uncontrollably, but this way, the two apertures were enduring this together, and the first aperture's crisis was soothed to a great extent. Mo Yao gasped. As the jade light became dim and the vibrations vanished, it seemed that Fang Yuan had passed the test. What is going on? You have two apertures. Mo Yao said. With two apertures enduring the test together, although the aperture walls were cracked, they did not break. Lad, you hid this very deeply, you actually have two apertures. Second aperture, to think that the rumors that had been going around have been confirmed by you. Mo Yao said with deep emotions. Fang Yuan was not willing to talk about this. He asked instead, you mentioned old immortal Kong Ju earlier, is it that refinement path supreme grandmaster from the olden antiquity era? That's right, it's him. Refinement path supreme grandmaster, even throughout human history, since ancient times, there had only been three. Future generations called them the Three Olds. They were the remote antiquity era's old eccentric Tian Nan, olden antiquity era's old immortal Kong Ju, and medieval antiquity era's refinement path supreme grandmaster long hair ancestor. Mo Yao continued recounting, among them, old eccentric Tian Nan had a weird personality, he tried to refine the sky and ended up losing his life. Old immortal Kong Ju had the deepest research in apertures, he created and helped the 10 extreme physiques to become immortals. Before him, there had never been any cases where a person of the 10 extreme physiques rose to become an immortal. As for long hair ancestor, he had the longest lifespan and refined the most immortal Gu. 88 True Yang building was refined by him. In fact, there were rumors that he could refine lifespan Gu, causing old ancestor giant sun to attack Langya blessed land, although there were no results from that. Mo Yao talked about many famous pieces of information. 3 old beings, 3 supreme refinement grandmasters, each of them was a legend. They were the 3 peaks of refinement path in human history, even rank 9 venerables could not mask their glory and reputation. Old immortal Kong Ju's inheritance tests the fated person's aperture. You actually had 2 apertures, you managed to get through luckily. Look, this inheritance is very good, it will be a huge help to you. Mo Yao continued. Fang Yuan's consciousness went in again. This inheritance was known as the Immortal Ascension Vital Information. It recorded old immortal Kong Ju's understanding of the immortal ascension process of all the different paths of Gu masters, all the difficulties they might face and how to deal with those difficulties. It listed the most crucial points for rising to immortal. Fang Yuan assessed in his heart, although this is not a Gu recipe or an immortal Gu, it has a huge value in terms of theoretical guidance. If Gu masters get it, it will not only help themselves but even allow them to understand other paths. It is truly an important treasure. This immortal ascension vital information dates back to long ago, it might not be useful for the currently trending paths. After all, these years of development have caused the rise of many new paths, it is no longer as dull and simple as back in the olden antiquity era. What I want to remind you is, the essence of this inheritance is not the immortal ascension vital information itself, but Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's notes when he read through it. His assessment is like the summary of the most important points, it gets right to the point and is truly worth more than 1,000 gold. Mo Yao gave another shocking revelation. Old immortal Kong Ju was a refinement path supreme grandmaster on par with long hair ancestor. His research, along with the immortal venerable's notes, truly has immense value. When a Gu master reads it, it will greatly increase the chances of them successfully rising to immortal. In addition, using the perspective of an immortal venerable, they can develop in the right direction, their Gu immortal journey would be guided and they could avoid many pitfalls along the way. This inheritance had really shocking attraction. Especially for geniuses like Fang Yuan who desired to take one more step and was not satisfied with being immortal. But Fang Yuan did not choose it. He had his previous life's experiences, he could repeat his run on the blood path. He had other motives for coming into the true inheritance space. Thus, Fang Yuan let go and allowed the jade lump to fly away from him, at a speed faster than the red light as it went into an unknown zone. You are really giving it up. When you think about this in the future, don't regret it. In his mind, Mo Yao sighed. Regret? There is no such word in my life. Fang Yuan laughed lightly, continuing his search. He swam in the darkness for a while, discovering the third light lump. This light lump was shining with a gray light, its speed was even faster than the first two light lumps, it was like a shooting star. As it flew in the space, there was a frost-colored tail trailing behind it. Fang Yuan tried to get close to it, but Mo Yao said, "Actually, you don't have to take such a risk every time, since you have already collected many wisdom path Gu worms, why don't you display their true value?" Oh. What do you mean? Fang Yuan's speed did not get any slower. Lad, thank me well, the move I'm going to teach you will allow you to avoid the test of the true inheritance and search for the content of the true inheritance directly. Mo Yao's method was not very complex. After Fang Yuan found the true inheritance light lump, the first step was for his consciousness to enter the lump, and that would trigger the test of the inheritance. Mo Yao's advice was, to use wisdom path Gu worms to create wills. By injecting this will into the true inheritance, he would wait for a while before recalling it. This way, he would be able to avoid intimate contact with the true inheritance, it was an opportunist method. Wisdom path has thought, will, and emotion. The so-called mind is made up of heart sense and divine sense. When your mind enters, your thoughts are exploring and interacting. Thoughts are like water droplets, they are the easiest to create, and also the most fragile. Because the numbers are huge, the droplets will merge into a river and enter to do the investigation. During this process, the Gu master's mind has to continue creating them without any pauses. As for will, they are superior to thoughts, like an ice cube. They have greater defense but are harder to create. They can however, move independently, and recalled when needed. Mo Yao explained. Fang Yuan was silent. Lad, at this point in time, why are you hesitating? I know you have been collecting information on Wisdom Path, and also purchasing those Wisdom Path Gu worms. Your special will Gu, deliberate will Gu, play will Gu, keep will Gu, and new will Gu are all useless now, when will you use them? Mo Yao laughed alluringly. Pausing for a while, she continued urging, right now, you must already be clear, my will is residing in your mind, it is already deeply connected to you. When you use these Gu to create wills, they would be pure and flawless, I cannot infiltrate them. Haven't you been wary of me? This method has a huge advantage, you can use it to avoid those true inheritance tests and check the secrets of the unparalleled inheritances. Unparalleled inheritance, they have much greater value than ordinary inheritances. What are you? Fang Yuan's gaze was hesitant. All along, he had never been so outspoken about his situation with Mo Yao. To think that Mo Yao would talk about it openly like this now. What was her true intention? Was it really like what she said, she only wanted to return the rank 7 Immortal Gu House Water Pavilion back to Spirit Affinity House? Mo Yao's honest expression created ripples in Fang Yuan's heart. Maybe he was too vigilant, and was too wary of Mo Yao. But wills were not like thoughts, thoughts were simple and were not good at deception. A land spirit formed from obsessions only spoke the truth. But wills were different. They were the product of many thoughts fusing together, they were much more complex than thoughts. Thus, they could lie to others. Fang Yuan shook his head, sending these chaotic pieces of information out of his mind. Now was not the time to think about this. Honestly speaking, Mo Yao's words were truly useful in Fang Yuan's viewpoint. He was successfully convinced to attempt it. Fang Yuan took out the wisdom path Gu worms that he had bought. He had the land spirit Little Hu immortal and could connect to treasured yellow heaven at any time. Standing on the foundation of a Gu immortal, it was extremely easy for him to purchase mortal Gu. Right now, the 8 wisdom path Gu worms in his hands could produce wills, but they were all different. Special will Gu could produce special wills, it could only be activated under special circumstances. Deliberate will Gu could create deliberate wills. When such a will is produced, it would be like carvings on a steel board, extremely difficult to get rid of compared to other wills. Play will Gu creates playful wills. It is the will that is most capable of creating emotions. There are also Keep will Gu, New will Gu, Battle intent Gu and others. What was worth mentioning was that these wisdom path Gu worms could produce different types of wills that were effective against other wills. For example, special will Gu can produce special wills, but can also devour special wills. Deliberate will Gu can create deliberate wills. They were hard to get rid of, but if one uses the right methods and finds the deliberate will Gu, it can be easily removed. Why did Fang Yuan buy these Gu worms? It was because of this. He wanted to deal with Mo Yao's mysterious will. But he had already bought so many of these Gu, and discovered that none could deal with Mo Yao's will. With the current situation, choosing which will Gu to use was not important. He casually chose the special will Gu, injecting primeval essence as a will was formed. The appearance of the will was similar to Fang Yuan. He looked like a youth with dark eerie eyes, but different from the main body. His face was more manly and had a more decisive expression. Wills can only reside within the soul. If you want to send this will out, you will need a small soul worm. Mo Yao reminded. Small soul Gu was a rank 1 Gu in soul path. It was very common but was the foundation of soul path. Many higher rank soul path Gu worms were refined step by step with it as the foundation. Mo Yao's reminder was redundant. Before she finished speaking, Fang Yuan summoned a Gu worm. It had no solid body, it was palm-sized and looked like a butterfly, flickering like light and shadow. If someone grabbed it, they would not be able to catch its hollow body. It was the rank 2 big soul worm. Fang Yuan patted it lightly, sending his special will into the big soul worm's body. Next, he used the big soul worm and made it fly to the closest lump of green-white true inheritance light lump. The big soul worm's speed was much faster than him moving alone. In just a short moment, it entered the true inheritance light lump, and a while later, the big soul worm with a tattered body flew back while wavering. Fang Yuan retrieved his will and looked. This third true inheritance was also an ordinary true inheritance, but to some Gu masters, or even Gu immortals, it had much greater value than the first 2 true inheritances. Chapter 599 Longevity, Hard, Hard, Hard. The saying goes, better to live a bad life than have a good death. Unless there were special reasons, there was nobody who wanted to stop living or not live longer. Gu masters, although they could cultivate, and reaching rank 6 would improve the essence of their life, they could not gain lifespan directly. Ever since the way of Gu had developed, countless talents had tried all sorts of methods to create a method to extend their own lifespan. Like 1st Gen Gu Yuan Qing Mao Mountain who chose to become a zombie. Or the demonic path Gu master in Southern Border Century Boy, using the return to childhood Gu on himself to maintain a child's appearance and reduce the speed of the loss of his life force. These were only mortal methods. Gu immortals had even more mystical methods. This third inheritance was a lifespan increasing method targeted at Gu immortals. The person who created it was none other than Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. A lifespan increasing method created by an immortal venerable. One could imagine the value of this true inheritance. According to the content, on a certain year, month, and day, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had an inspiration, and it created a brilliant idea. He named this immortal art, Possession. The core was a rank 6 Possession Immortal Gu. Other than that, there were about 3,000 rank 5 Mortal Gu of all kinds. To think that Possession Immortal Gu's origin is actually here. Fang Yuan looked at this with a palpitating heart. In his previous life, during the chaotic battle of the 5 regions, Possession Immortal Gu had been extremely well known. Many high-ranking Gu immortals managed to extend their lifespan, and that changed the situation of the 5 regions battle. Although Possession Immortal Gu was rank 6, it was a crucial Gu worm that could change the very structure of the world. In an instant, Fang Yuan had a sudden urge. This is the origin of the Possession Immortal Gu. As long as he took it and grasped the origin, in the future during the 5-region battle, he would be able to sell this Possession Immortal Gu and gain a terrifying profit. Especially with his previous life's memories, he knew who had the greatest need for this Possession Immortal Gu. As long as he planned properly, the benefits were unthinkable. But soon, Fang Yuan calmed down. The special will on the big soul worm sent even more information. This true inheritance was only an empty shell. The Possession Immortal Gu inside along with the 3,000 Mortal Gu had all been taken away by someone already. Inside 88 True Yang Building, there were 88 true inheritances that were set up by Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. But after so many years, a portion of them had already been taken by people. Mo Yao had once said, during her time, when she explored 88 True Yang Building, out of the 88 true inheritances, only 53 were left. Mo Yao was an expert from 10,000 years ago, as 88 True Yang Building's rounds were hard to pass. For every 10 years of the imperial court contest, there were very few occasions in which a winner reached 10 edges. But even so, after so many years, there were some capable individuals who managed to enter the true inheritance secluded domain. The number of true inheritances left now was definitely smaller than 53. This is. While communicating with the special will on the big soul worm, Fang Yuan's pupils expanded suddenly. Although the true inheritance was taken away, Fang Yuan's special will still made some shocking discoveries. Using the soul to take over a body, it is nothing but a struggle at death's door. Death is still unavoidable. To extend one's lifespan Gu is the best option. The road of a Gu immortal is filled with calamities and tribulations. It is hard for the body to resist them, and it is hard for the soul to exist independently. The maintenance of longevity means the defiance of heaven. It is hard, hard, hard. Inside the true inheritance, there was such a paragraph. These words directly criticized Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's method of possession. The tone was simply too arrogant. After looking at multitudes of lifespan extending methods, lifespan Gu still remained as the best choice. The final 3 hard words were truly filled with emotions. Finally, the person who wrote this also left his name, Spectral Soul Demon Venerable. Seeing this name, one would feel that it was only natural for the criticism to exist. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable and Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had the same status. They were both rank 9 Gu Masters. But Giant Sun Immortal Venerable was an immortal venerable during the medieval antiquity era, while Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was a demon venerable who appeared after Giant Sun. 200,000 years after Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's demise, the demonic path Venerable Spectral Soul who had the greatest nature for murder was born. 88 True Yang Building had such a huge reputation. When Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was invincible in the world, he naturally found his way into 88 True Yang Building. It was nothing strange. Don't tell me Possession Immortal Gu was taken by Spectral Soul Demon Venerable. No, the possibility is very slim. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was the creator of Soul Path. He was the greatest expert in terms of souls. Not even Giant Sun Immortal Venerable could match him in that. From the words that Spectral Soul Demon Venerable left behind, he had no interest in the possession method at all. He wanted to exist alongside heaven and earth, but he as one person was facing increasing difficulties one after another. Seeing that a predecessor had also searched for a longevity method, he felt some deep emotions and left behind these words. Feng Yuan analyzed. Even rank 9 venerables invincible in the universe during their time could not resist the flow of time. Time was the greatest enemies of heroes and beauties. Lifespan Gu was hard to find, their location was fixed, and they were produced in limited supply, only heaven and earth could create them naturally. The rank 9 venerables searched the lands, using up all of the lifespan Gu, but failed to find new lifespan Gu, thus they can only find new ways to extend their lives. The number 1 people in this world, behind their invincible authority, there was the sadness and anxiety towards their limited lifespan. Thus, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's possession technique made Spectral Soul Demon Venerable lament about the difficulty of longevity. Even Immortal Venerables or Demon Venerables, such invincible beings, cannot escape the fate of death. Sigh, the wheel of fortune goes round and round, they may rule for generation after generation, but after their primes they will inevitably break down, and those at rock bottom can have their fortunes reverse. In this world, can there be any eternal existences? In his mind, Mo Yao had a heavy emotion as she sighed deeply. But this was not what Feng Yuan thought. He had an eerie gaze. The great Tao of heaven and earth focuses on the balance of all beings, and the restraints they place on each other. But when a Gu master cultivates, they search all over the world and gather resources, using them to promote the growth of oneself. Thus this is really the path that defies the way of heaven. Maybe this is why tribulations and calamities occur. But precisely so, eternal life that surpasses longevity is the goal that is worth my pursuit. Thinking so, there was a fire burning in his heart, becoming brighter and hotter. Immortal venerables and demon venerables could only have a long life, but his goal was the greater level of eternal life. This was a realm that venerables could not reach. Using a phrase from Feng Yuan's previous world, that would be, competing against heaven, competing against earth, competing against humans, the joy is endless. Water can only produce beautiful waves when they hit on rocks, people can only feel the joy in life when they engage in competition. In Feng Yuan's previous life, he was only rank 6, close to 7. Towards the rank 9 existences, he had never looked up to them, he only felt a strong aspiration in his heart. Here, he saw another side of the venerables, fatigue, weakness, helplessness. These made his fighting spirit surge to another level. The true inheritance ahead of him was empty, it was not worth wasting time for. Feng Yuan continued searching. Next, he found 2 ordinary inheritances, they were all involving wisdom path. These 2 true inheritances had 2 rank 6 immortal Gu respectively. One was false emotion fake will Gu, and the other was loving affection Gu. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's wisdom path attainment was very profound, this was a well-known fact. Especially in terms of emotion Gu, he had expanded it and created many new Gu recipes. Giant Sun Immortal Venerable created a harem and collected beauties, making girls all over the world fall for him, this showed the power of his emotion Gu. These 2 inheritances were not what Feng Yuan wanted, he chose to let go. Strange, didn't you say that there were not only ordinary true inheritances, but also unparalleled inheritances in this secluded domain? After searching for such a long time, why haven't I found one? Feng Yuan was confused and asked Mo Yao. During this period, Mo Yao had not said a word, she seemed to have taken a blow from the possession immortal art, her fighting spirit had dwindled and she had hidden in Feng Yuan's mind without showing herself. The debut release occurred at NOV3L equals B, J, N. Hearing Feng Yuan's words, she showed her figure and said plainly, "Humph, how long has it been, you are already impatient. Back in my day, I searched for a whole 3 months. The secluded domain is extremely huge, and all the inheritances are moving around, there are only a few unparalleled true inheritances, it is normal that you have not found one. Have some patience, lad. Fang Yuan asked again, actually, you came here before, what good inheritances did you find, give me some details about it. This was his true question. Humph, I saw many inheritances of course, but here, the true inheritances fly around random with no pattern, there is no use in telling you, you can only rely on your luck to search. Beware of the time, the more inheritances you come into contact with, or the longer you stay here, the faster these true inheritances fly, and the more dangerous your situation becomes. Back then, with my Gu immortal realm, I could only stay for 3 months, and nearly died here. As Mo Yao said this, her tone was filled with lingering fear. Even you almost died here. Fang Yuan saw the main point in her words. Lad, you are immortal, you are too weak. I estimate that you can only check 8 true inheritances, and can stay for at most a month. Right now, you have already seen 5 inheritances, you have to be careful. Mo Yao vaguely reminded him. What was it that threatened the life of a grand Gu immortal like yourself? Fang Yuan asked. But Mo Yao only smiled tenderly, saying, if you are fated for it, you will know when you experience it, before concealing herself. Fang Yuan's expression turned slightly grim. He had always held a suspicion. In the video in his previous life, there were 11 Gu immortals from Central Continent, but after they entered the true inheritance secluded domain, after the omitted parts, there were only 9 of them who reappeared, all with injuries. Does that mean the 2 missing had died in the secluded domain? Sometimes, having this Mo Yao's will was advantageous. Fang Yuan had gotten Mo Yao's reminder and became more careful, slowly investigating. 3 days later, he got close to the 6th true inheritance, and used the special Will Gu and Big Soul Worm to obtain the information inside the true inheritance. This inheritance came from Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. It was similar to the 3rd inheritance in that they were both lifespan extending immortal arts. It involved a new path that Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had created from researching Renzu, he called it Yin-Yang Path. To use this method, 2 Gu immortals, 1 male and 1 female, have to cooperate and copulate, to achieve the result of one of their lifespans increasing. But there was a flaw. If one gains lifespan, the other must lose the same amount. In other words, it was transferring the lifespan of one person to another. This inheritance had also been taken by others already. The popularity of lifespan extending methods could be seen clearly here. This is the 6th true inheritance. Fang Yuan muttered, thinking of Mo Yao's reminder. According to Fang Yuan's endurance, he could see 8 true inheritances at most. Beyond this number, a huge crisis would descend upon him. If he wanted to obtain a true inheritance, Fang Yuan needed to be careful now. After all, he only had 2 chances left, and at the same time he needed to be wary of the inheritance being emptied out already. 13 days later, Fang Yuan found the 7th true inheritance. This true inheritance light lump was the size of a washing basin. It was shining brightly in white light and had a stronger aura compared to ordinary inheritances. Lad, this will broaden your vision, this is an unparalleled true inheritance. In his mind, Mo Yao said. Chapter 600, Supreme True Inheritance. Unparalleled True Inheritance. Fang Yuan's gaze brightened upon looking at the lump of burning white light in the distance. He quickly took out special Will Gu and a big soul worm. He condensed a will and moved it into the big soul worm, looking as it flew towards the true inheritance light lump. Unparalleled true inheritances far surpass ordinary true inheritances. I want to see what is so different about it. Fang Yuan was waiting expectantly. But an unexpected thing happened. As the big soul worm approached closer to the true inheritance light lump, Fang Yuan sensed his connection with the big soul worm was weakening. When the big soul worm had not even reached 300 steps from the light lump, the connection between it and Fang Yuan had thoroughly broken. What is this situation? Fang Yuan was startled, looking at the unparalleled true inheritance flying away leisurely in its original orbit. And the big soul worm he had released showed no signs of movement, being completely still. Saying it was dead was also not appropriate, but no matter how Fang Yuan commanded it, it quietly hovered without the slightest bit of response. This unparalleled true inheritance is not simple, be careful. Mo Yao's will also gave a sound of surprise and warned Fang Yuan. What is going on? Fang Yuan curiously and cautiously approached the big soul worm, picking it up for examination. There was no signs of injury on the big soul worm, but the will that had been instilled into it was completely gone. Big soul worm was a rank 2 Gu, and its wild will was removed after being refined by Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan's will occupied its body, thus he could maneuver it like moving his fingers. But right now, Fang Yuan's will that was in it, refined into special will by using special will Gu, had inexplicably disintegrated with not even a trace remaining. The big soul worm had become completely ownerless, anyone would be able to send a trace of their will and instantly refine it. This was also the reason why Fang Yuan could not command it regardless of what he did. The previous several times, Fang Yuan had exploited special will to probe out true inheritances, ingeniously avoiding the test of the true inheritance. This method had been proved successful time and time again, he had never expected it to fail before even verifying the unparalleled true inheritance. What was this unparalleled true inheritance hiding that could completely clear Fang Yuan's will? Ah, I remember. So it was this. Just as Fang Yuan was hesitating, Mo Yao suddenly spoke up. She laughed coquettishly, "Kid, should I say it is your good luck or bad luck? There are not many unparalleled true inheritances, but there are not few either, and what you are encountering now is the most special among them. Please advise me." Fang Yuan's expression turned calm. "I saw this true inheritance before and it also left behind a deep impression on me. Back then, even I had to expend a lot of effort to approach it. Inside it is a rank 7 immortal Gu giant sun immortal venerable personally refined, called human Qi Gu. Its ability is mysterious and could even be said to be strange, even I had to spend a lot to investigate it clearly." Mo Yao sighed. While Mo Yao was alive, she had been a rank 7 Gu immortal, a fairy of spirit affinity house with awe-inspiring reputation. However, she had to pay a considerable price to approach this true inheritance. Fang Yuan was only a mortal now, it was natural for him to not even be able to approach it. Human Qi Gu. Fang Yuan pondered over this crucial name. He had a realization and asked, could it have some relationship with the 3 elements of immortal ascension? Lad, your guess is correct. Mo Yao sighed and explained, in the advancement to Gu Immortal, the 3 Qi of heaven, earth and human are particularly crucial. When advancing into a Gu Immortal, you would need to completely shatter your aperture and take in the heaven Qi and earth Qi. The more heaven Qi and earth Qi you can take in, the higher your chance of succeeding. But heaven Qi and earth Qi cannot be accumulated limitlessly, they need to be on an equal level with human Qi. And human Qi is the sum of the Gu Master's own accumulation. The Gu Master's battle strength, toughness of their physical body, the depth of their soul, familiarity with Gu worms, understanding of heaven and earth, awareness of their own nature as well as luck, talent, aptitude, fortuitous encounters, insights and so on would transform into human Qi when advancing to Gu Immortal. The more the Gu Master has accumulated, the more man Qi they would have. The more man Qi there is, the more heaven and earth Qi they can take in, and the higher their chance of advancing to Gu Immortal. And this man Qi Gu's purpose is to take in the man Qi of other people, purify them and add it to oneself when advancing to Gu Immortal, thereby greatly raising the chance of the breakthrough, as well as deepening the foundation and the potential of Gu Immortals. Mo Yao's words greatly broadened Fang Yuan's vision. He could not help but praise, there is actually such an immortal Gu, created with such an idea. Terrific. In human history, Gu immortals had always been in extremely few numbers. The difficulty of advancing to a Gu immortal, among numerous famous rank 5 Gu masters, there might only be one who could successfully advance. Among the crucial keys of advancing to a Gu immortal, one was at the top, the Gu master's accumulation. Many Gu masters don't have deep accumulation. The man-chi they could condense when advancing to Gu immortal would be very little, but the amount of heaven and earth chi instead appears in very high amounts. As such, the balance would not be reached, heaven and earth chi would suppress and swallow the man-chi, finally the Gu master would be assimilated by heaven and earth and perish. But if there was man-chi immortal Gu, this difficult test would be eliminated. By collecting others' man-chi, purifying them and gathering it into one's body, even if the accumulation is not enough, it would not matter. One could say, with man-chi immortal Gu, the chances of advancing to Gu immortal would increase to the extreme, raising the numbers of Gu immortals. And raising the numbers of Gu immortals would mean a distinct increase in a region's strength. No doubt, this was a Gu that could change the battle situation of the 5 regions. As long as the news was leaked, all super forces would fanatically rush over like ducks. However, man-chi immortal Gu was too strong, it was at rank 7, higher than the spring-autumn cicada currently. Fang Yuan had a mortal body, he could not endure the might of man-chi immortal Gu. His will had been devoured by the immortal Gu before it was even able to approach it, purified into a negligible amount of man-chi and stored. If not for Mo Yao giving the information, Fang Yuan would still be in the dark and unknowing of what happened. Man-chi Gu is definitely good, but it does not suit me. Fang Yuan regretfully glanced one final time at the burning white light lump and sighed, shaking his head before leaving in another direction without the least bit of reluctance. Man-chi Gu's realm was too high, Fang Yuan simply did not have the qualifications to control it. Man is the spirit of all living beings, Gu are the essence of heaven and earth. To Gu masters, Gu were tools. But man-chi immortal Gu was too strong, if it was an ice blade, Fang Yuan was an infant, he would be frozen by the cold aura let out by the ice blade before he even approached it. The most crucial point is that I cannot use man-chi immortal Gu. I need to break through from mortal to advance to Gu immortal, before that I simply cannot handle man-chi Gu. And if I become a Gu immortal, what would I need man-chi Gu for? Helping others? Man-chi immortal Gu was not suitable for the lone Fang Yuan. Only those super forces would need it. Unless Fang Yuan formed his own force. He slowly flew around in the true inheritance secluded domain. Fang Yuan gradually comprehended something and said after a moment of silence, Mo Yao, I realize the danger you spoke of. He. Mo Yao smiled, not surprised. When Gu masters enter the true inheritance secluded domain, every time they come in contact with a true inheritance or the longer the time they stay here, the faster these true inheritances would move around. Thus, urging the Gu masters to quickly choose a true inheritance. By the end, the true inheritances would move as fast as meteors, Gu masters simply would not be able to capture them. Because of this, the Gu masters could lose their lives at any minute. Pausing a while, Mo Yao continued, and the danger to life originates from the true inheritances. You saw the unparalleled true inheritance just before. Your will had not even neared it before it was refined into man-chi by man-chi immortal Gu. Think about it, if it crashes into you with the speed of a meteor, you won't have any time to dodge, what will happen then? Fang Yuan lightly snorted. He could completely imagine that scene. If a mortal body was struck by the burning white light lump, no matter their physical body, soul, or will, everything would probably disintegrate and be refined into man-chi. Like I said before, you are too weak, only at the mortal realm. Even the tests of the ordinary true inheritances are a difficult hurdle to you. Unparalleled true inheritances are even more troublesome. Let me tell you, there is a higher level of inheritance above unparalleled true inheritance, supreme true inheritance. Mo Yao revealed a sensational piece of information. Supreme true inheritance. In this whole true inheritance secluded domain, there are only 3 supreme true inheritances. Mo Yao sighed with deep emotions, seemingly immersed in the depths of her memory. It is simply impossible for a mortal to receive these 3 supreme true inheritances. The difficulty of an unparalleled true inheritance is already extremely high, moreover Imperial Court Blessed Land prohibits the entry of Gu immortals. This is also the reason for 88 True Yang building being able to stand tall for so long. Among the 88 true inheritances, there are still over half remaining. Fang Yuan carefully pondered and approved of Mo Yao's words. Entering true inheritance secluded domain was extremely difficult, and the opportunity was very uncertain. First of all, one needed to be the winner of the Imperial Court contest held every 10 years. Secondly, they needed to complete at least 10 floors of 88 True Yang building. Finally, after entering, they still needed to successfully pass the test of the true inheritance. In other words, every 10 years, among the many heroes of Northern Plains, there would only be one who would rise above others and take control of the owner token. Simply relying on the owner token was still not enough. The winner must have a strong force which should not be exhausted too greatly in the Imperial Court contest, and also should have enough experts beside him. His force should have enough talents in all fields and involving a wide range of paths, only then could he hope to pass 10 floors. After fortunately being able to enter true inheritance secluded domain, the tests of the true inheritances would further wipe away a batch of these winners. The tests were very difficult. Even Fang Yuan, a reborn old monster, almost suffered a setback, let alone these people. What was more absurd was that even if they passed the test, would that true inheritance be coincidentally suitable for them? Not necessarily. Those who could reach this step were usually dragons among dragons, phoenixes among phoenixes, heroes among heroes, with all 3 aspects of aptitude, talent and fortuitous encounters. Such characters would have extremely high aspirations, and would naturally think about it a lot and look through more options. As such, by the time they could no longer stay within true inheritance secluded domain, it would be too late for regret. Who is to say they might not die here? The true inheritance's flying speed is getting faster. You have one more chance left. No matter which true inheritance it is, take it quickly and leave. Not good, leave. Just as she was persuading him, Mo Yao's tone suddenly changed and let out a startled cry. Fang Yuan turned his head around to take a glance and saw a true inheritance, the size of an adult man, blossoming with all kinds of mysterious colors, whizzing towards him. In the dark secluded domain, it had a very long dazzling and burning tail trailing behind it. A light lump the size of a large bowl was an ordinary true inheritance. A basin-sized light lump was an unparalleled true inheritance. Then what was a light lump the size of an adult? Fang Yuan instantly thought of the name, Supreme True Inheritance. In the whole true inheritance secluded domain, only 3 supreme true inheritances existed, and now, one was heading towards Fang Yuan.